Chapter 1032. This black dog, what kind of divine being is it? Bing Wuxin voiced her doubts. It's good at scheming, it's more resourceful than others, it's cruel and vicious, and its goal is to annihilate all the challengers. Is it really just the master of the martial yard? Han Fei didn't quite understand, either. She said leisurely, every living thing has a purpose in its actions. It has spent so much effort to annihilate all the challengers. What is its purpose? Is it just a meaningless killing? The black dog must have some ulterior motive, but no one knew what it was. I know, Dongfang Tianfeng said with a smile, waving the Jojo booklet in her snow-white palm. Everyone's eyes lit up. As the oldest family, the great Oriental family's existence couldn't be traced back, even surpassing the current history of Jojo. However, the glittering jewel wonderland was a very special place. All the challengers who had participated in the past were not allowed to divulge any information about the Wonderland. Once they did so, they would be annihilated by the Wonderland, and mortal fairies were no exception. I know what you're thinking, but where did your knowledge about the glittering jewel wonderland come from? Dongfang Tianfeng twirled the hair that fell on her chest with her fingers. Upon hearing that, everyone was enlightened. What they knew was, of course, what the elders of the faction had told them. The moment the glittering jewel wonderland descended, the senses of the wonderland would be obscured, and that was when the faction leader would transmit information to the disciples. However, the time was very short, and the information was limited. However, the great Oriental family's intelligence network was spread all over the world, and the Jojo booklet could receive information from thousands of people at the same time. How much information had Dongfang Tianfeng received in such a short time? It was probably an astronomical figure. In terms of knowledge about the glittering jewel wonderland, she wasn't any less than all the challengers combined. Seeing that they had all understood, Dongfang Tianfeng flipped open the Jojo booklet, and several shiny lines of information emerged automatically. The master of the martial yard, a creature that looks like a black dog, first appeared in the 10th session of the glittering jewel wonderland's descent and disappeared without a trace since then. After its appearance, the glittering jewel wonderland underwent a drastic change, turning from a wonderland to a bloody, demonic mirror. When the 5 major disasters first descended, they were accompanied by a massive amount of spiritual energy of heaven and earth, as well as various resources, prompting the challengers to madly utilize the resources to break through their limits and achieve progress. At the same time, even if you die in the disaster, you will be transported out of the glittering jewel wonderland, and your life will not be in danger. When the ominous black dog appeared, the 5 disasters of the glittering jewel wonderland underwent a drastic change. There were only disasters, but no resources descended. Death meant true death, and one would not be transported back to the Jojo continent. From then on, the glittering jewel wonderland turned from a place of inheritance to a place of slaughter. Even so, there are still abundant resources in the wonderland that Jojo doesn't have. There are still tens of thousands of challengers rushing to the glittering jewel wonderland. After a few messages appeared, everyone fell into a deep shock. It turned out that the original glittering jewel wonderland was actually a peaceful land of inheritance. However, everything changed when the black dog appeared. Dongfang Tianfeng's expression had somehow turned grave. She said, "Actually, it's just a small matter. The Dongfang family had obtained this information thousands of years ago. The mastermind behind the glittering jewel wonderland is known as the Black Ghost among the senior members of the great Oriental family. No one knows who it is, when it appeared, or why it has the supreme magical power to change the layout of the glittering jewel wonderland. Everything seemed to have appeared suddenly, and the glittering jewel wonderland was changed." After a pause, Dongfang Tianfeng said, "According to the earliest records of the glittering jewel wonderland, a large number of challengers obtained the inheritance from the glittering jewel wonderland, and it made the Jojo continent flourish. Although the glittering jewel wonderland has fallen, the human race of Jojo has always been thriving within 1,000 years, and it has reached its peak. Everything changed after the 10th glittering jewel wonderland. The number of challengers who participated was less than 1 in 10. Although the remaining challengers did obtain the same resources as the rumors said, the remaining 90% of challengers died in the glittering jewel wonderland. In general, the resources that the Jojo continent obtained from the glittering jewel wonderland were reduced by 90%. The number of geniuses of the Jojo continent also decreased. Less than 1 in 10 of the 100 years of accumulation remained. This led to the continual weakening of the continent, and it has been getting poorer and weaker until today. 1,000 years ago, the glittering jewel wonderland was reduced from a place of inheritance to a tumor of the Jojo continent. Without it, the Jojo continent would be even more prosperous today. Hearing all kinds of secrets that had never been circulated in the outside world, the crowd was shocked. That mysterious black dog, just who was it? What was its purpose in causing the continent's decline? I have 2 questions, Bing Wuxin said in a low voice. First, how can you be sure that the current Jojo continent is not as prosperous as it was 9,000 years ago? Dongfang Tianfeng chuckled. Do you know how powerful the human race was 9,000 years ago? There were countless all-creations old monsters, and any small or medium-sized faction was overseen by an all-creations old monster. But look at the Central Prefecture today. How many all-creations old monsters are overseeing a mere small or medium-sized faction? And how many young heroes do you know who have broken through the all-creations old monster? Ever since the drastic change in the glittering jewel wonderland, the Jojo continent has been in a state of stagnation. The all-creations old monsters of the older generation are about to pass away, and the young heroes of the younger generation are dying in large numbers. Only a small number of them can break through the shackles and enter the ranks of all creations. The speaker was unintentional, but the listener was interested. Comparing the situation with the Red Blood Palace, the Purple Cloud Palace, and even the other regions, the crowd realized a shocking fact. All creations old monsters were extremely rare. The Red Blood Palace was a huge faction, but it only had Mo Tianxian, the strongest person below the mortal fairy. Apart from her, there wasn't even a stage 1 all creations. All of them were at the almighty level. For a whole 300 years, no new all creations old monster had been born. The gap was so huge that it made one's hair stand on end. It was the same for the Purple Cloud Palace. Even though the situation in the big regions was slightly better, all creations old monsters were still extremely rare. There was a huge gap between the martial artists of the entire continent. It was very abnormal. This was actually the question that had been bothering Suyu. The situation of the Red Blood Palace was really unimaginable. On one side was an unbelievably strong all creations old monster, and on the other side, no new all creations old monster had been born. The reason was that there was a gap in talent. The 10% of challengers who were still alive were not enough to produce enough all creations old monsters. This is my second question. Since you know that the glittering jewel wonderland has become a lingering poison that has plagued the Jojo continent for hundreds of years, why didn't you stop the trials? If that's the case, with the accumulation of several generations of geniuses, we should be able to recover part of our vitality. However, Dongfang Tianfeng only smiled softly. Because of the human heart, Bing Wuxin was about to ask again, but she heard Suyu sigh. If there's an opportunity for the blessed and heavenly lands to soar and surpass their old enemy, the heavenly knife region, but the opportunity is accompanied by great danger, and the heavenly knife region has discovered it, what do you think the blessed and heavenly lands will do? Bing Wuxin was stunned when she heard that. If the blessed and heavenly lands didn't fight for it, the heavenly knife region would. If the heavenly knife region obtained it, the blessed and heavenly lands would be completely suppressed, so the blessed and heavenly lands would strike first. Similarly, the heavenly knife region would think the same. If the blessed and heavenly lands obtained it, the heavenly knife region would be in a disadvantageous position, and the blessed and heavenly lands would strike first. Moreover, the influences of the Jojo continent weren't limited to the blessed and heavenly lands and the heavenly knife region. There were more than 40 other regions. No one was willing to fall behind and give up on such an amazing opportunity. Therefore, all the influences would join in the fight, even though they knew the danger. This was the reason why this overt conspiracy had lasted through the ages. The martial arts of JoJo are getting worse with each generation, and the many legacies of the ancient times have been severed. It's difficult to innovate new techniques, and the elixirs have lost the motivation to research and develop them. The entire martial arts environment is deteriorating day by day, and it's on the verge of collapse. In less than 100 years, many of the major martial arts sects will be removed from the world, and their legacies will be severed. The martial arts world will deteriorate further, and eventually it will weaken to the lowest level of the martial arts world. And the lower level of the martial arts world will no longer be able to withstand the invasion of the Ghost Clan. The people of the JoJo continent would never forget the tragic war between humans and ghosts 100 years ago. In that war, the JoJo continent was almost wiped out. In other words, the JoJo continent is heading toward the abyss of destruction because of the glittering jewel wonderland. And it's getting faster and faster. This is the future that the great Oriental family speculated after sorting out the situation of the continent throughout the ages. Moreover, it's an extremely optimistic and conservative speculation. In reality, it's very likely that it won't take 1,000 years, 100 years, or even the present for the tragedy of JoJo's destruction to occur. Everyone was speechless for a long time, as if their hearts were blocked by something. If it weren't for Dongfang Tianfeng's words, they wouldn't have realized that they were in an era of rapid degeneration. Did no one stop it for thousands of years? Bing Wuxin shook her head, expressing her doubts about Dongfang Tianfeng's words. Yes, why not? Dongfang Tianfeng said. 100 years ago, there was an emperor who turned the tide. He realized the precarious situation of the continent and the endless dangers of the glittering jewel wonderland. Therefore, he vowed that if he ascended to the throne of JoJo, he would gather all forces to resist the glittering jewel wonderland. However, when he was about to unify JoJo, the Ghost Clan invaded, and he perished in the war between humans and ghosts. His great cause of unification was destroyed, and his ambition to resist the glittering jewel wonderland vanished into thin air. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. 100 years ago, the peerless king who was about to ascend to the throne of JoJo, Shinichen, a legendary emperor of a generation, a sad emperor of a generation. He defeated all the strong men of the continent, but perished when he ascended to the throne of JoJo. Suyu was the only one who knew the secret. He didn't die at the hands of the Ghost Clan, but a traitor who dealt a fatal blow, the Central Prefecture's king. 100 years after his death, the continent didn't have any great talents who could unify JoJo. The various forces couldn't resist the temptation of the glittering jewel wonderland and sent batch after batch of embers. Dongfang Tianfeng clenched her fists, her eyes filled with hatred. Even though they were just listening, everyone could feel the crisis of the continent. When the Ghost Clan invaded 100 years ago, Shunichen was the main force to resist them. 100 years later, not only did the JoJo continent not improve, but it continued to deteriorate. If it happened again, who could resist the great emperor of the Ghost Clan? JoJo needed a powerful figure, someone who could suppress all voices with his words and resist the glittering jewel wonderland together. It was a pity that the brilliant emperor of 100 years ago had disappeared from the stage of history. Was there no emperor before Shinichen? So you asked. The history of the ages was too long. Except for the great Oriental family, no other forces had a complete record of the history of the ages. Chapter 10:33. Yes, Dongfang Tianfeng confirmed. Dongfang Tianfeng said with certainty, in the early years of the glittering jewel wonderland's nurturing, a large number of peerless geniuses were cultivated. Within 1,000 years, 3 of them became unparalleled emperors and unified JoJo. However, all 3 of them have fallen. So you seem to have caught on to something. His eyes flashed. How did they perish? The first JoJo emperor died of inner demons. The second JoJo emperor died of the demon race. The third JoJo emperor died of a meteor. Dongfang Tianfeng paused when she reached the last one. Everyone present fell into a long silence after listening to her. 3, no, including Shunichen, had all died a violent death. They seemed to be able to see that there was an invisible giant hand of darkness obstructing the unification of Jiuzhou. As for Suyu, he was able to detect some sort of connection. Inner demons, demon race, meteor. These three seemed to be unrelated, but Suyu thought of an item. The floating life door. Meteorites fell from the sky, broke open the floating life door, and opened the floating life door, and the demon race came out. It was the innate ability of the demon race to cause living creatures to go berserk. Wasn't a meteor a sign of the arrival of the floating life door possessed by the demon race? Moreover, the second Jiuzhou emperor died at the hands of the demon race. Realizing the truth, Suyu's back broke out in a cold sweat. Could it be that the demon race was behind all this? Suyu was even more certain of his guess when he thought of the black dog that was surging with demonic energy. The demon race was the instigator. According to the calculations of the great Oriental family, there are traces of the demon race behind this, Dongfang Tianfeng said solemnly. Han Fei raised her brows. The demon race. The scariest race since the ancient times? There were only a few records about the demon race in the ancient books, and they were not detailed. What was certain was that the last time the demon race descended, the humans of Jiuzhou were almost wiped out. It was the arrival of the glittering jewel mortal fairy who sheltered the human race and allowed them to reproduce and live again. They were on the brink of extinction and regained their vitality. What surprised her was that even Han Fei had a grave expression on her face. Only Suyu looked unfazed, as if he wasn't surprised. That black dog that my race calls the Black Ghost, if I'm not mistaken, belongs to the demon race. You're the culprit who killed the prodigies of Jiuzhou and caused the Jiuzhou continent to decline. Dongfang Tianfeng said coldly. Han Fei nodded lightly with her snow-white chin. There's no doubt about that. The black dog does have the aura of the Devil Clan. As he spoke, he looked at Suyu. There was a similar aura between the two. To tell you the truth, the main purpose of my participation in the glittering jewel wonderland is not to obtain resources, but to exterminate the Black Ghost. Dongfang Tianfeng looked around at the crowd, her expression determined. Han Fei asked placidly, "Is this the reason why the great Oriental family has come to the glittering jewel wonderland?" The Dongfang family has a deep understanding of the past and the present. They have sensed that the continent is on the verge of destruction. But what then? Kill the black undead and save the world? Of course, you won't believe it if I say that I support justice and turn the tide to save the 9 regions. Dongfang Tianfeng laughed at herself and said, "Let's put it this way. The Dongfang family has been keeping an eye on the Black Ghost for many years. The Dongfang family will gain a lot of benefits from killing it. As for what the benefits are, it's a family secret and I can't tell you. It's a pity that it never showed itself. Now that it has shown itself, it's a once-in-a-blue moon opportunity. I must eliminate it. Therefore, I must go to the cemetery." Han Fei nodded. As long as there's a goal of benefit. In the world, there might be people with great sentiments who did not care about themselves, but dedicated themselves to dedication. However, there was no such thing as an organization without benefits. Any organization was a combination of benefits, and it was the same for the great families. If the great Oriental family did not have any benefits and wanted to eliminate evil for the continent, Han Fei would not trust Dongfang Tianfeng. What about you? Are you staying behind to fight the black undead? What is your purpose? Dongfang Tianfeng blinked her bright eyes, glancing at Suyu, Bing Wuxin, and Han Fei. Han Fei replied placidly, "Demonic energy. To kill the black dog and obtain the pure demonic energy." Bing Wuxin pointed at the blood stains on the ground. "The sword in my hand." The challenger who had died in vain had infuriated Bing Wuxin's murderous intent. "What about you, Brother Su of unknown origin?" Dongfang Tianfeng's eyes shone with a crystalline luster. The corners of Su Yu's mouth curled up. "Me? Confirm the conjecture in your heart." After swallowing the honey of 100 flowers, So you had a bold conjecture about the nature of the glittering jewel wonderland with his powerful perception. Now was the time to verify his conjecture. Dongfang Tianfeng smiled softly. All right, since we share the same interests, let's go meet that black dog. Share the same interests? So you did not dare to agree. He had never believed a person easily, let alone a stranger whom he had only met once. A one-sided story. Having reached a common goal, the three of them headed for the last yard, the cemetery. Before leaving, Suyu took one last look at the Marshall Tower. What exactly was above the second story of the 100-story Marshall Tower? A day later, in the cemetery. Haha, it is said that the cemetery is where the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy are buried. The remains of a mortal fairy are the oldest remains in the world, and their value is immeasurable. Dongfang Tianfeng looked at the graves of various sizes in the distance. Her eyes filled with a complicated look. Among them, a huge grave that pierced through the clouds stood majestically. That was the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Wait, hasn't the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy been weathered long ago, leaving only the divine crystal in the world? Suyu frowned. It was quite different from the rumors. Dongfang Tianfeng shrugged. The remains of a mortal fairy are comparable to fairy artifacts. Do you think they can be weathered? That's just a rumor. The only thing that has really been weathered is her soul, which has turned into a divine crystal. The remains are still intact. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. So what's going on with the other graves? Suyu looked around at the graves of various sizes. With his transparent eye, he saw majestic black silhouettes wandering around the graves, emitting extremely terrifying scents. Each of the souls had an aura comparable to that of a mortal fairy. A stern look appeared in his eyes. Upon hearing that, Dongfang Tianfeng's eyes became much more solemn. Those are the foreign races that invaded Jiuzhou that the glittering jewel mortal fairy killed when she was alive. Their corpses are all sealed in the cemetery, and their souls are bound here for eternity, guarding the glittering jewel mortal fairy's grave. Getting close to the grave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy is extremely risky. The remnant souls of those foreign races are very terrifying. Han Fei's face was filled with shock. The remnant souls of mortal fairies. The remnant souls of mortal fairies posed a fatal threat even to the Starry Sky elites. Gazing at the remnant souls of mortal fairies, no one dared to step in rashly. At the border of the cemetery, apart from Suyu and the others, there were many surviving challengers who had rushed over. Their faces were unfamiliar, and they must be part of the other 20,000 challengers. They were also hesitating at the border, staring at the cemetery with greed in their eyes, but they dared not step in. A bunch of good-for-nothings. It's just a cemetery. Get out of my way. All of a sudden, a thunderous roar came from the horizon. A majestic figure surrounded by golden light and boundlessly domineering stepped on flowing clouds, breaking through the wind and approaching. Seeing this person from afar, everyone's faces changed drastically, and they scattered in terror. Han Fei and Dongfang Tianfeng turned around abruptly. As Starry Sky elites, their faces changed at the same time. Why is this lunatic here? Dongfang Tianfeng's pretty face darkened, and she looked extremely fearful. Han Fei's pretty eyes narrowed, and she said word by word, the number one among the Starry Sky elites, Central Prefecture's Zhan Wushuang. Among the four great Starry Sky elites, Han Fei ranked third, and Dongfang Tianfeng ranked fourth. The number one was also the strongest among them, the number one youth elite of the Jiuzhou continent, the true number one under the Starry Sky, the first disciple of the Central Prefecture's king, Zhan Wushuang. Boom! The golden light dazzled the world, covering the heavens. Zhan Wushuang landed in the center of the cemetery with a loud crash. The cemetery trembled, and countless graves were shaken to the ground. The remnant souls of mortal fairies emitted angry wills. As the wills appeared, the world suddenly darkened, turning from day to night, and gusts of bone-piercing chilly wind blew through the cemetery. The martial artists standing at the border of the cemetery retreated in terror. Many who retreated too slowly were turned into powder by the chilly wind, and even their souls didn't manage to escape in time. In the golden light, Zhang Wushuang revealed his true appearance. He was clad in golden armor, and there was a domineering aura between his brows. Standing on the spot, he had the power to look down on the world. Zhang Wushuang. Su Yu's eyes narrowed slightly. The disciple of the Central Prefecture's king? Dongfang Tianfeng stared at the mighty figure and said fearfully, Zhang Wushuang, a born king. He was born in a royal family in the mortal world. It is said that when he was born, the souls of 3,000 kings and emperors paid homage to him. He ascended the throne at the age of 3 and defeated the stronger ones at the age of 5. He annexed the mortal kingdom of the Central Prefecture and made tens of thousands of countries submit to him. At the age of 10, he established the peerless martial faction, swept away all the forces in the region, and made the 3,000 factions of the Central Prefecture bow to him. At the age of 15, he besieged the palace of the Central Prefecture and challenged the Central Prefecture's king. He was recognized by the Central Prefecture's king and accepted as his disciple. It is said that when he was 15, he could withstand one blow from the Central Prefecture's king without being defeated. At the age of 16, he could withstand 2 blows from the Central Prefecture's king. At the age of 17, he could withstand 5 blows from the Central Prefecture's king without being defeated. According to the calculations of the senior members of the family, he is the most powerful genius since the beginning of time. In terms of qualifications, he is far above the previous Jiuzhou emperors. Our family thinks highly of him, and he is likely to become the new Jiuzhou emperor of the continent. Just like his entire life, he has the body of a king and ruled the world. Even though they were enemies, they couldn't help but be amazed. At the age of 5, he became the emperor of the mortal world. At the age of 10, he became the king of the martial arts faction of the Central Prefecture. At the age of 15, he was the legendary emperor who could rival the Central Prefecture's king. He had been an emperor all his life. Was he a born king? All of a sudden, Su Yu felt an indistinct pressure. How strong is his qualification? As one of the 4 great starry sky elites, do you know? Su Yu asked. Dongfang Tianfeng's lips curled into a bitter smile. As one of the starry sky elites? To be precise, he is a born king, and we are not at the same level. Do you know how he got the first place at the Starry Sky Tea Party to select the new batch of Starry Sky elites? Dongfang Tianfeng extended a finger. One move, he defeated the other 3 Starry Sky elites with only one move. In this world, no one from the younger generation can withstand a single move from him, no matter who it is. 3 Starry Sky elites combined couldn't even withstand a single move from him? He is indeed a king above the younger generation. I once heard that the one who guided the Central Prefecture's king's 5 golden light guards, the leader of the bright light guards, Shui Di, and many all-creation strong men wasn't the Central Prefecture's king, who was in seclusion all year round. It was him, Zhang Wushuang. In a sense, they should call him master. Guided all creation's strong men, especially famous all creation's old monsters like Shui Di and the Golden Light Guards. Chapter 1034. The nearest remnant soul of a mortal fairy roared, and its majestic figure was surrounded by a surging chilly wind as it tried to grab Zhang Wushuang from afar. Suddenly, the chilly wind raged, and a pitch-black ghostly claw tore through the void and pressed down across the void. At the edge of the cemetery, there were no challengers who dared to stand. This attack had exceeded the endurance limit of all challengers. Han Fei, Dongfang Tianfeng, and the others had to retreat to a certain distance. What right do you have to attack me if you fail and become a wastrel? Zhang Wushuang put his hands behind his back, and his eyes were full of disdain as he took a step forward. This step seemed to contain some kind of supreme magic power, and everyone's heart was beating along with it. It was like a hand had brushed past their hearts. The ghostly claw that was about to press down was blown away by an invisible force when it was 10 feet away from Zhang Wushuang and turned into smoke. The majestic ghost shadow let out a shrill scream and shattered, completely disappearing from the world. Its grave was suddenly shattered, and a large number of remains and funerary objects were scattered all over the ground. As funerary objects of a mortal fairy, even if they were just relics, they were amazing resources that ordinary people dreamed of. However, Zhan Wushuang snorted and took a step forward, as if he didn't see it. The bones, together with the relics on the ground, were crushed into dust. The spectators outside the cemetery all felt their hearts bleeding, and they were extremely angry. But when their eyes fell on Zhan Wushuang's back, their anger disappeared, and they smiled bitterly. He was too strong, and they didn't even have the courage to fight against him. Zhan Wushuang doesn't care about the relics of a mortal fairy, but we are scrambling for them. A top expert in the region sighed. I don't know how to describe my feelings to fight for the relics that Zhan Wushuang doesn't care about. Another top expert in the region said bitterly. As a top genius in the region, the invisible gap between him and Zhan Wushuang made people feel desperate. He killed a remnant soul of a mortal fairy with a simple gesture, and his unparalleled king's aura shocked many powerful ghosts. The angry, ghostly figures extinguished their anger and didn't dare to move forward rashly. Zhan Wushuang's cold eyes glanced at all the ghostly figures. The ghostly figures trembled, struggled for a moment, and then lowered their heads and made way for him, like defeated soldiers. No matter where he was, Zhan Wushuang was like an emperor. Humph! The losers don't have the right to raise their heads. Zhan Wushuang stepped on the golden light and entered the tomb of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Before the crowd could catch up, they heard a few angry shouts coming from the tomb. Then, the tomb of the mortal fairy, which had existed for thousands of years, suddenly exploded. A ball of golden light surged into the sky. Zhan Wushuang held a jade coffin in his left hand, and a silvery white corpse could be vaguely seen in the coffin. His flesh and blood had all dried up, leaving behind only a silvery white skeleton. In the skeletal hand was a pitch-black scepter, the glittering jewel fairy scepter. It was the magic treasure of the glittering jewel mortal fairy when she was alive. It was a replica of an emperor-based saint artifact, a heaven-defying magic treasure that could purify everything in the world. Moreover, there were many funerary objects of the glittering jewel mortal fairy in the jade coffin, including most of her treasures when she was alive. Everyone saw this and held their breaths. The richest and largest treasure in the glittering jewel mortal fairy had finally been unearthed. However, no one dared to snatch it, not even thinking about it. As a king of the same generation, ordinary people were not qualified to compete with him for things. Zhan Wushuang, who had soared into the clouds, glanced at all the challengers with disdain out of the corner of his eye. Even Han Fei and Dongfang Tianfeng did not stop. He glanced at them indifferently and tore the void with one hand, revealing a magnificent galaxy world. With a leap, he had forcibly left the glittering jewel wonderland in such a shocking way. From his appearance to his departure, it had only been a few breaths. However, his king-like aura, which was as strong as a mortal fairy's, left an unforgettable impression on all challengers, regardless of whether they knew him or not. Suyu heaved a sigh of relief. This was the number one person of the younger generation under the starry sky. Suyu could not help but wonder if Zhan Wushuang was a fallen old monster who had been reincarnated. He was born with the souls of 3,000 emperors, unified the mortal empire of Jiuzhou at the age of 5, suppressed the 3,000 factions of the central prefecture at the age of 10, and drew his sword against the central prefecture's king at the age of 15. All kinds of unimaginable legends had shaken the ages. Even the Jiuzhou emperors of the past could not be compared to him. It was not unreasonable for the great Oriental family to conclude that he would become the supreme Jiuzhou emperor in the future. Witnessing it with his own eyes, Suyu increasingly understood the great Oriental family's judgment. Such an outstanding man, a born emperor, had potential that surpassed all the heaven rulers in the history of Jiuzhou. However, Suyu was not afraid. Instead, he was full of fighting spirit. Zhan Wushuang was a born emperor. Suyu had the divine nine-dragon cauldron, and Yun Yazi had an emperor-based saint artifact. One was an innate, and the other was an acquired. As a latecomer, Suyu might be able to catch up with this born emperor. A long time after he had left, the cemetery was still in dead silence. Everyone was shocked by the thunderous means just now, until a familiar, strange laugh interrupted everyone's thoughts. Hee hee, I didn't expect that after Jojo has been in decline for such a long time, there would still be such a born emperor in this era. Besides, apart from him, there are many other amazing talents in this batch. They are more outstanding than any generation of the past. In the broken tomb of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, as the stones rolled, a pitch-black dog crawled out of the ruins with a disheveled look on its face, laughing strangely. Without waiting for Suyu and the others to speak, a challenger trembled and screamed in fear. It's the Black Ghost. Ah, run. It's the one who mobilized the tide of beasts and killed 20,000 challengers. Blood-curdling screams fill the air. The screams of fear and terror formed a chain. In the blink of an eye, all the challengers around the cemetery had fled, and not a single one was left. They had developed an instinctive fear of the black dog, as if they had experienced an unusually bloody and cruel scene. The black dog crawled out slowly. It had been chased, and its emerald eyes turned to look at Suyu. Who didn't let me down? You've come to the cemetery. Dongfang Tianfeng's brows were filled with murderous intent. The demon race. Tis TSK, little girl, don't be so hot-tempered. Actually, I still like you very much. After all, you have the scent of an old friend on you, the black dog said with a smile. Old friend? Which old friend? Dongfang Tianfeng's expression changed slightly, and her innocent face was clouded with an indiscernible haze. Since you've come here, it means that the disaster of books, the disaster of martial arts, and the disaster of beasts have not been able to do anything to you. The black dog looked impressed. It's rare to see such a group of outstanding juniors. It makes me feel good. In the cemetery, the last yard. In the yard where the final battle was about to take place, if the black dog was eliminated, the torment that the glittering jewel wonderland had inflicted on the Jojo continent might come to an end. Both parties were in a stalemate, looking for the best opportunity to strike. Hey, what's with the murderous look? The show has come to an end. Of course, everyone has to be present. The black dog cackled, and its eyes swept across the surroundings. Two beams of emerald light swept across the trees around the cemetery. The trees that were hit by the green light were reduced to dust in an instant. Swish, swish, swish. Many hidden figures jumped out from the destroyed trees. By Ling Tian, Suyu recognized one of the figures. It was by Ling Tian, whom he had parted ways with in front of the martial tower. Behind him were Qian Feng, Zhao Li, Tian Yu, and more than 80 burly men of bronze and iron who were half-naked and covered in runes. Their eyes were dull and hollow, and they looked like a special group of people. They must be the other group of people hidden in the Heavenly Knife region. Haha, Brother Su, I trust you've been well since we last met. Bai Ling Tian led the crowd with a smile and landed 1,000 feet away from Su Yu and his companions. Su Yu glanced at the 80 strange-looking bronze and iron men and said indifferently, I haven't seen you for a long time. You found so many ancient bronze corpses. You're really generous. Upon hearing this, Bai Ling Tian's smiling expression stiffened for a moment. The ancient bronze corpses were an ancient sect that had been on the decline for tens of thousands of years. They were experts in refining corpses. The refined corpses were divided into iron corpses, bronze corpses, and silver corpses. The iron mummy's fighting prowess was no weaker than a 9th-grade almighty. The combat prowess of the bronze corpse was no less than that of a Stage 2 All Creations old monster. As for the rumored silver corpse, its attack power was comparable to that of a Stage 6 All Creations old monster. The Heavenly Knife region had actually managed to collect the lost bronze corpses, and there were more than 80 of them. Such generosity was truly astonishing. If the Heavenly Knife region had sent these powerful bronze corpses into the battlefield during the war between the two regions, the blessed and heavenly lands would have most likely lost a large part of their territory. However, the Heavenly Knife region had never done so, so the answer was simple. This was not the work of the Heavenly Knife region. There was another mysterious force behind Bai Ling Tian. Combined with his mysterious background, it was not difficult to infer that Bai Ling Tian's identity was not simple. More than 80 bronze corpses were quite a shocking number. If they attacked together, although they would not reach the level of Zhan Wushuang, who could stun the remnant souls of mortal fairies, it would not be difficult for them to force their way into the mausoleum of Lin Lang's mortal fairy. Qian Feng sneered. Su Yuxian, are you afraid? Su Yu glanced at him placidly. Who am I afraid of? You think I'm afraid of someone like you? Upon hearing that, Qian Feng's smile froze. He said angrily, Don't be arrogant. You're in for it later. Shut up. Now is not the time for internal strife, Bai Ling Tian said placidly with a frown. Qian Feng shut his mouth immediately and retreated respectfully. Brother Su, before the great enemy, you and I, Bai Ling Tian said with a smile. So you cut him off. Join forces? Impossible, but I'm sure we won't be enemies. His wariness of Bai Ling Tian was far greater than that of Dongfang Tianfeng, Gu Taishu, and even Zhan Wushuang. Bai Ling Tian had always given him an inexplicable sense of danger. I'm glad to have Brother Su's promise, Bai Ling Tian said with a placid smile. He lifted his eyes to look at the other batches of challengers who were descending from the sky. He was a little regretful. It's a pity that the demon-devouring emperor is not here. Otherwise, he would be very interested in this mysterious black dog. The demon-devouring emperor was a savage youth who was superior to Han Fei and Dongfang Tianfeng among the Starry Sky elites. He was born with a penchant for devouring demonic beasts and absorbing their essence to enhance his abilities. He was ruthless in his methods and cruel in nature. Among the youths of Jiuzhou, his name struck fear in people's hearts. Wherever he went, he was always accompanied by blood. Rather than calling him a human, it was more appropriate to say that he was the emperor of the demons. People called him the demon-devouring emperor. Chapter 1035. Su Yu glanced at the others and found a familiar figure. Gu Taishu. He was alone, and the people of the Purple Cloud Palace were nowhere to be found. Su Yu vaguely sensed a few whiffs of savage, demonic beast aura from him. As if he had sensed Su Yu's gaze, Gu Taishu cast a glance at him, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. His eyes were filled with unprecedented confidence. He had obtained the last drop of the blood of the real spirit. Was he going to refine the 9-fairy elixir? Once he swallowed the 9-fairy elixir, he would become a complete 9-spirit body, and his strength would increase greatly. The savage demonic beast aura probably came from one of the real spirit demonic beasts in the beast yard. Almost everyone is here. I can send you all on your way now, the black dog said with a smile, spitting out a black scepter from its mouth. Isn't this the treasure of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, the glittering jewel fairy scepter? Someone exclaimed. They had clearly seen Zhan Wushuang take away the glittering jewel fairy scepter along with the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. What was up with the glittering jewel fairy scepter that the black dog spat out? I knew it, Su Yu said softly. Seeing the black dog crawl out of the grave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, Su Yu knew that there was something wrong with the remains and treasures that Zhan Wushuang had obtained. Dongfang Tianfeng was not surprised at all. She said playfully, Zhan Wushuang is indeed powerful, but he has too little information. His efforts are destined to be in vain. What he took away was not the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Upon hearing that, the challengers who had gathered were shocked. Miss Dongfang, please explain clearly. We clearly saw Zhan Wushuang take away the jade crown from the grave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. If Zhan Wushuang had not taken away the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, then they still had a chance to fight for the final inheritance. Dongfang Tianfeng sneered. Who told you there was the grave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy? Many challengers were stunned. In fact, their faction leader had not had time to tell them what the grave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy looked like, and most of the elders of the faction had no chance to see it. They felt that it was the tomb of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. That tomb was the largest and the rest of the tombs were surrounded by a myriad of stars surrounding the moon. It was a testament to the special status of the central tomb. In the cemetery of the glittering jewel wonderland, apart from the glittering jewel mortal fairy herself, who else was qualified to receive such treatment? Only the glittering jewel mortal fairy herself. It was precisely this thought that caused everyone to walk into a dead end, and Zhang Wushuang was no exception. Bing Wuxin frowned. I remember you saying that the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy are in the cemetery, right? He also said that these ordinary tombs were the powerful enemies that the glittering jewel mortal fairy had killed in her lifetime, and that she was using them to protect the glittering jewel mortal fairy's remains. Dongfang Tianfeng chuckled and said, "Yes, the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy are in the cemetery, but did I say that the remains are in any of the tombs? No, he's in the cemetery, but not the tomb." Upon hearing the bizarre answer, the crowd looked at one another in confusion. "Miss Dongfang, please don't keep us guessing. Could it be that the remains of the glittering jewel mortal fairy have no grave? Could it be that she was buried somewhere randomly?" Many challengers were anxious. Dongfang Tianfeng sneered and stared at the black dog. "Do you know that there's a hidden garden in the glittering jewel wonderland?" Everyone's hearts trembled. The legendary Sixth Garden. The Sixth Garden that had never appeared since time immemorial. The glittering jewel mortal fairy was highly respected. Is it possible for the challengers to steal her remains in the cemetery? Her real remains have always been in the last garden, the Sixth Garden. Dongfang Tianfeng stared at the black dog with a burning gaze. The grave that was buried in the center of the cemetery was only the cemetery master, a close friend of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, who guarded the cemetery after her death. Unfortunately, she was sealed by Zhang Wushuang again and forcibly taken away when she woke up. Upon hearing these two secret messages, everyone had a sudden realization. The Sixth Garden was the real burial place of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. But we clearly saw that the glittering jewel fairy scepter was also in the jade coffin. "What's going on?" one of the challengers asked. Dongfang Tianfeng looked at the black dog and said, "You have to ask it. This black dog has been in the grave for such a long time, so it must be his doing." "Ha, little girl, you seem to know a lot of things." The black dog held the real, glittering jewel fairy scepter in its mouth and laughed. "Apart from the remains, everything else is an illusion. The guy must be furious if he finds out, right?" How arrogant was Zhang Wushuang? If he knew that he had been fooled by a black dog, how could he not be furious? The doubts in their hearts were gone, and everyone's eyes gradually brightened up. The Sixth Garden. Only by opening the Sixth Garden could the real burial place of the glittering jewel mortal fairy be revealed. Most of her life's inheritance was left in the Sixth Garden. What they had to do next was to find a way to open the Sixth Garden. According to the rumors, there was only one way to open the Sixth Garden, and that was to gather all 5 Yard Masters. Dongfang Tianfeng said in a timely manner, "Opening the Sixth Garden requires 5 Yard Masters. I have the Book Yard Master. Su Yuxian has the Flower Yard Master, and a challenger named Gu Taishu should have the Beast Yard Master. We only lack 2 Yard Masters. One of them is the Cemetery Master, and the last one is the Martial Yard Master. And the Martial Yard Master is standing right in front of us. Everyone, what are you waiting for?" Dongfang Tianfeng's words were very impactful. However, they were not stupid, and they would not be easily ordered around. "Miss Dongfang, you just said that the Cemetery Master has been taken away by Zhang Wushuang. Even if we capture the Martial Yard Master, we still lack a Yard Master. We're just doing useless work." Dongfang Tianfeng said disdainfully, "Have you forgotten that when a Yard Master dies, a new Yard Master will be born? That Yard Master being taken away from the glittering jewel wonderland is equivalent to death. The new Cemetery Master is among these black undead." Suddenly, many of the challengers' breathing quickened, and their eyes frequently swept across all the shadows. The master and disciple discovered who was most likely to become the new Yard Master. Let me tell you one more thing. Only the challengers who hold the title of Yard Master will be summoned to the 6th Yard when it opens. In other words, only 5 people will be able to enter the 6th Yard in the end. Dongfang Tianfeng threw out another piece of important news unhurriedly. What? The challengers who had been secretly planning to reap the benefits were all shocked. Their plans had failed, and they had no choice but to come forward and capture the Yardmaster. However, how to capture the Yardmaster was a problem. They had several choices. First, capture the Black Martial Yardmaster dog. Second, identify the new cemetery master from the remnant souls of the mortal fairies. Third, snatch the book Yardmaster from Dongfang Tianfeng. Fourth, snatch the beast Yardmaster from Gu Taishu. Fifth, snatch the flower Yardmaster from the person named Su Yuxian. The first three were undoubtedly the most difficult choices for them. The terror of the black dog was deeply rooted in their hearts, and they did not have the courage to face it directly. Each of the remnant souls of the mortal fairies was terrifyingly powerful, and they carried great risks of life and death. As for Dongfang Tianfeng, who would dare to snatch something from the great Oriental family? She could only snatch it from Gu Taishu and Su Yuxian, two unknown people. Gu Taishu was fine. As the #1 expert of the blessed and heavenly lands, and having participated in Han Fei's matchmaking contest, he had extraordinary strength and was considered somewhat famous. There were no more than 5 people present who would dare to provoke him. However, Su Yuxian, as a survivor among the other 20,000 challengers, had never experienced the 100th story of the Martial Tower or the Martial Disaster, and did not understand Su Yu's strength. To them, he was the perfect target. However, he was separated from Han Fei and Dongfang Tianfeng, and did not know their relationship, so he dared not act rashly. "Brother Su, you look like you need help very much," Dongfang Tianfeng said with a smile. "Why don't you exchange the Yardmaster with me, and I'll protect you?" Su Yu only smiled and did not bother to answer. Dongfang Tianfeng knew Su Yu's strength and was not afraid of snatching it. Moreover, Dongfang Tianfeng was secretive, and her intentions for the garden were unclear. All the more he could not give it to her. "Dongfang Tianfeng, give me your book Yardmaster, and you can snatch the black dog." Han Fei turned her head and said calmly, as if it was a matter of course. Dongfang Tianfeng was stunned. Pointing at Su Yu, she said indignantly, "Sister Fei, do you think it's easier to snatch me than him?" Han Fei nodded nonchalantly, extended her palm, and uttered 2 words indifferently. "Give it to me." Dongfang Tianfeng had failed to threaten Su Yu, and was threatened by Han Fei instead, which made her depressed. The book Yardmaster was definitely not going to be handed over. Taking a few steps back, Dongfang Tianfeng wrinkled her nose. "Fine, I'd like to see who's stronger after a few years." With a clap of her slender hands, a giant fiery red bird appeared beneath Dongfang Tianfeng's feet, taking her up into the air. Han Fei shook her head placidly, and a pitch-black sun appeared before her. She stepped into it, and when she reappeared, she was right above Dongfang Tianfeng. With a series of explosions, the 2 starry sky prodigies began to fight. So he was speechless. They were already killing each other before the black dog was successfully captured. "Haha, Yardmaster, I'm very interested too." Bai Ling Tian smiled and stepped into the mausoleum, ready to search for the new Yardmaster. After weighing the pros and cons, many challengers followed suit and joined in the screening and capture of a Yardmaster. Only a few challengers cast their gazes at Su Yu after careful consideration. "Haha, Su Yuxian, let me have a taste of your strength first." Qian Feng caught a glimpse of Bai Ling Tian entering the depths of the mausoleum. After some hesitation, he finally decided to show himself. During this period of time, he had had enough of Bai Ling Tian. Not only did he ignore the enemy, who had killed more than half of his own faction, but he even cooperated with him. The remaining people of the Heavenly Knife region were bitterly disappointed. If not for the fact that Bai Ling Tian was personally trained by the region master, he would have suspected that Bai Ling Tian was a spy planted by the Red Blood Palace. Now that chaos was everywhere, it was the best time for revenge. As for Su Yu's treasures and magical powers, Qian Feng was wary but confident. As the second strongest expert of the blessed and heavenly lands, how could Qian Feng not have a trump card? He was confident that if he played his trump card, Su Yu's performance in the 100th story of a martial tower and in the illusory realm of the martial disaster would be unstoppable. To defeat Su Yu, he only needed to play his trump card. Su Yu glanced sideways and said placidly, "Have you forgotten by Ling Tian's warning? Working together to warn the outside world?" "Sorry, I forgot." Qian Feng grinned hideously. If he killed Su Yu before Bai Ling Tian came to his senses, he could frame the other challengers. Swoosh! Qian Feng opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of pitch-black, fine needles. It was a semi-manufactured fairy artifact. However, the real danger was that the fine needles contained a deadly poison that made one's soul uneasy. The absolute poison of the fallen immortals? A nearby trial taker suddenly cried out in alarm. His face was full of fear as he retreated like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bough. Su Yu raised his brows. This poison was well known throughout the ages, so who didn't know about it? Be it the ancient times or the current world, there was no one who did not know of it. This poison came from an expert who had failed to break through to the mortal fairy realm. Once a stage 6 All Creation's old monster failed to break through to the mortal fairy realm, the All Creation's mighty force in his body would be greatly weakened. The weakened All Creation's mighty force would condense into a strange poison, the fallen immortal strange poison. The martial artists who failed to break through the mortal fairy realm were called fallen immortals, hence the name of the fallen immortal strange poison. This kind of poison was extremely toxic. Except for the fallen immortal themselves, it was difficult for anyone to resist the strange poison of the fallen immortal. Once poisoned, the poison would corrode one's soul, causing one's soul to perish. Throughout history, anyone who was poisoned by this poison could only be cured by a mortal fairy powerhouse. Otherwise, no one could escape death. Chapter 1036. The poison of the fallen fairies on the fine steel needles formed layers of black ripples between Su Yu's eyebrows, passing to the depths of his skull and straight to his soul. Su Yu's whole body, starting from his eyebrows, was constantly turning black, like a mass of scorched black. It was extremely terrifying. Seeing this scene, many of the trial takers shuddered in fear. That was the strange poison of the fallen fairies, and those who were poisoned had no chance of survival. Combined with the semi-manufactured fairy artifact that could travel through the void, it did not give anyone any time to escape. With a void teleportation, it plunged into the enemy's body. This was an out-and-out killing weapon. Humph, humph, humph. Do you know who the domain master intended to deal with when he gave this to me? Qian Feng was in high spirits after getting his revenge. This is to deal with Zhan Wushuang. The Heavenly Knife region gathered the power of the region to successfully create this deadly weapon. For this, the Heavenly Knife region lost countless manpower, material, and financial resources. The Red Blood Palace could not afford it, even if they sold everything they had. You should feel lucky to die under this great killing weapon. After all, this was prepared for Zhan Wushuang. You died a worthy death. Just as he was feeling proud of himself, an indifferent sigh suddenly came into his ears. It turns out to be so precious. It would be impolite to refuse. I will accept it. All of a sudden, a ball of weak light burst forth from Su Yu's body, permeating from the inside out. The pitch-black color on the surface of his body dissipated like the dark clouds that had been torn apart by the bright moon. In the end, only a little black ripple remained between his eyebrows. In front of the dumbfounded crowd, Su Yu gently pulled out the black steel needle with his index and middle fingers of his right hand, effortlessly removing it. Then, he opened his palm and looked at it with great interest. There was no sign of poisoning at all. Qian Feng was stunned for a moment, and then his face changed dramatically. You have a very high-grade soul defense treasure? It had to be said that this speculation was very close to the truth. Su Yu's attainments in the Heaven Sun gazing at air technique had obtained the blessing of cultivation and the royal cloak. Soul attacks below the level of mortal fairy could hardly hurt Su Yu. The strange poison of the fallen fairies was indeed terrible. Su Yu could not deny that without the royal cloak, he would have died. The poison was so intense that Su Yu didn't even have time to use the Milky Way star sand before his soul was destroyed. Shocked, Qianfeng immediately realized that something was amiss. He pointed 2 fingers in the air and shouted, "Withdraw!" All of a sudden, the pitch-black needle in Su Yu's palm trembled slightly and pierced through the void. Apparently, it was summoned by its master and was ready to return to its master's palm. "You want to leave so easily after stabbing me?" Su Yu said nonchalantly. A layer of faintly discernible starlight emanated from his right palm. Shortly after, a drop of blood essence was forcefully extracted from the pitch-black steel needle. The essence blood was tenacious. It wriggled and attached itself to the steel needle, unwilling to leave. However, with the help of the Milky Way star sand, it was successfully peeled off. As a ball of flame rose from Su Yu's palm, the drop of blood turned into ashes. Only then did the steel needle stop trembling, lying quietly on Su Yu's palm. On the other hand, Qianfeng's face suddenly turned pale. Soon after, he crazily spat out a mouthful of blood that filled the air and turned into a blood mist. You forcibly erased the mark of a semi-manufactured fairy artifact." Qianfeng's eyes were full of disbelief, as if he had just experienced something appalling. Whenever a treasure was upgraded to a semi-manufactured fairy artifact, the refining mark left behind would often be integrated with the treasure's spirituality. If the mark was forcibly removed, the spirituality would often be destroyed, causing the treasure to be damaged and its grade to drop. Except for the elusive 9 Great Prefectures kings, he had never heard of a martial artist below the mortal fairy level who could remove the mark without damaging the spirituality of a treasure. However, this scene was happening right in front of him. The challengers beside him were also horrified. They had seen many strange talents, but it was the first time they had seen a monster like Su Yu, who was not afraid of the strange poison of the fallen immortals and snatched someone else's semi-manufactured fairy artifact. Inexplicable awe and fear welled up in everyone's hearts. They finally understood why Han Fei would rather snatch Dongfeng Tianfeng than attack Su Yu. That was because this unknown Su Yuxian was truly unfathomable. Many people who had designs on Su Yu gave up on the idea. Su Yu acted as if there was no one else around. He sacrificed a drop of his own blood essence, injected it into the steel needle, and refined it simply. Not long after, a vague sense of spiritual connection was felt. Information about this formation immediately appeared in his mind. This formation was called the soul-piercing and spirit-snatching needle. It specialized in restraining all kinds of soul bodies and could nail a soul to death with a single blow. When attacking the enemy, it could turn into an illusion or a solid body. It was mysterious and unpredictable, and impossible to guard against. Combined with the strange poison of the fallen immortals, its power was amazing, and it was no less than a low-grade fairy artifact. After understanding the information, Su Yu raised his head and stared at Qianfeng calmly. "I didn't want to kill you at first. Although you almost violated someone you shouldn't have, you have come to me several times to seek death. I have no reason to be merciful anymore." With a flick of his finger, the pitch-black steel needle turned into a stream of light and pierced into the void. Qianfeng was horrified. He turned around and fled. At the same time, he sacrificed several powerful defenses. As he fled, he cried out involuntarily, "Senior brother Bai, save me," before he could finish shouting. A steel needle pierced through his throat. The remnants of the strange poison of the fallen immortals spread rapidly, turning him black. Most of the strange poison of the fallen immortals on the soul-piercing and spirit-snatching needle was used in the first blow. However, even if there was a small amount left, it was not something Qianfeng could resist. He was instantly charred, and his vitality rapidly weakened. "You only remember that Bai Lingtian warned you to unite against the common enemy and not to attack me, but you've forgotten the second thing," he said. Su Yu grabbed the soul-piercing and spirit-capturing needle and sighed. The second thing was what he wanted to say, that you are no match for me at all. Forgetting the first thing would only result in punishment from Bai Lingtian. Forgetting the second thing would result in death. Qianfeng's eyes were filled with indignation as he turned into dust. The black dust spread all around, turning the ground pitch black. All the spiritual trees withered, withered, and died in a short period of time. Even the air was left with some unpleasant scents. The challengers who were watching dared not stay any longer. They fled one after another. Even the challengers who were in the mausoleum to capture the Yard Master fled together. Swoosh! The faint sound of something piercing through the air rang out from behind Suyu. Turning around, a complicated face was reflected in Suyu's eyes. "Oh, you've captured the Mausoleum Master so soon." Bai Lingtian had his hands behind his back. His whole body was spotless, and there was no sign of him being disheveled. It was hard to imagine that he had just emerged from the mausoleum filled with the remnant souls of the mortal fairies. "How can you be so sure that I was the one who captured the new Yard Master?" Bai Lingtian asked instead of answering. Suyu put away the steel needle nonchalantly, glanced at him, and shook his head. "I wouldn't be surprised even if you captured that black dog." The black dog was undoubtedly the most difficult character to deal with. After a long silence, Bai Lingtian sighed softly. "You should have killed him, but he made the decision on his own. Death cannot wipe out his crimes. So, the battle between you and me is finally about to begin?" Suyu asked with a faint smile. Bai Lingtian nodded, and then shook his head. "I think there will be a battle between you and me, but not now." Crash! Two powerful waves came from the sky, and two dainty figures descended. Han Fei's face was expressionless, as usual. Dongfang Tianfeng twisted her arms, her face full of resentment. "Sister Fei, don't you feel ashamed for snatching your little sister's stuff like that?" Han Fei turned a deaf ear to her, her expression indifferent. It seemed that the book Yard Master had fallen into Han Fei's hands. The 4 Yard Masters were in her hands, and there was only the last Yard Master left, the Martial Yard Master. "Humph! Damn dog, my Yard Master is gone. Hurry up and compensate me with yourself." Dongfang Tianfeng stomped her feet and pointed at the black dog angrily. The black dog smiled wretchedly. "All right, young mistress, as long as you can catch me." When he finished speaking, he glanced at the remaining challengers. The battle for the Yard Master had ended. The Mausoleum Master had fallen into Bai Lingtian's hands, and no one dared to touch the black dog. The remaining challengers chose to leave this whirlpool one after another, choosing to look for small opportunities and sublimations with caution. In the end, only Suyu, Bing Wuxin, Han Fei, Dongfang Tianfeng, Gu Taishu, and Bai Lingtian remained. "Let's go together," Dongfang Tianfeng bellowed, taking the lead in attacking. After a moment of deliberation, Suyu chose to attack as well. Dongfang Tianfeng alone might not be a match for the black dog. Han Fei, Bai Lingtian, and Gu Taishu chose to attack one after another. Bing Wuxin gripped her long sword and was about to join the battle, but was stopped by Suyu. "Wait, don't attack for now." "Why?" "The black dog has killed so many of our challengers. Why don't you let me attack?" Bing Wuxin was puzzled. Suyu merely shook his head. "I have something to confirm, so don't attack for now." After a moment of deliberation, Bing Wuxin suppressed her murderous aura and watched the battle in silence. Swoosh! When Suyu joined the fray, the 5 of them had already attacked. The one with the fiercest offensive was Han Fei, who controlled dozens of pitch-black great suns and sliced through everything with the power of space. Dongfang Tianfeng activated her secret technique, and the figure of the fire phoenix beneath her expanded dramatically, emitting shocking flames all over its body. Its power was several times stronger than before. Bai Lingtian and Gu Taishu's attacks were slightly lacking, but the spiritual energy of the world was chaotic when they attacked, and their power was extraordinary. Together with Suyu, the meteor light stream great formation and the 8 silver pearls shattered all obstacles along the way. With the 5 of them joining forces, even Stage 2 all creations, old monsters wouldn't be able to avoid them. In the face of the unprecedentedly united attack, the black dog was full of praises. "Ha, great! I didn't expect the Jiuzhou continent, which was on the verge of decline, to give birth to so many top-notch heaven rulers. All of you are either blessed with top-notch bloodlines or rare great destinies. Any one of you can be called the top genius of the century. Now that so many of you have gathered in one go, I haven't been so happy in a long time." As he laughed, the black dog's face suddenly turned hideous, and he said eerily, "Because it's more interesting to kill them this way. You want to obtain the legacy of the glittering jewel mortal fairy and revitalize the Jojo continent? Go to hell, all of you." With a hideous laugh, the glittering jewel fairy scepter in the black dog's mouth suddenly erupted with a mass of pitch-black brilliance, sweeping across the surroundings. A bizarre scene unfolded. The attacks launched by the crowd were like clay oxen disappearing into the sea. Suyu's meteor light stream, great formation, stopped spinning at lightning speed. Hanfei's dozens of black suns vanished into thin air. The fire phoenix beneath Dongfang Tianfeng's feet shrieked and vanished into thin air. Bai Lingtian and Gu Taishu's attacks were similarly neutralized. Chapter 1037. All attacks could be dissolved in an instant. This was the function of the glittering jewel fairy scepter, a replica of an Emperor Saint artifact. Who could fight a head-on? "Kids, it's my turn." The black dog smiled sinisterly and stabbed the glittering jewel fairy scepter into the ground. All of a sudden, Suyu felt he was shrouded by some invisible force. Suyu cast a small fireball without batting an eyelid. However, the spell was stopped halfway through. It was the same after several attempts. "We can't use our magical powers anymore." Hanfei's cold face wavered a little. Without thinking, she turned and flew away from the cemetery. On the contrary, standing within the boundaries of the martial yard, they still couldn't escape the purification effect of the glittering jewel fairy scepter. Haha, it's useless. The scope of effect of the glittering jewel fairy scepter is the entire glittering jewel wonderland. Unless you're like the born emperor, who tore the space apart and escaped from the glittering jewel wonderland, you're just a bunch of mortals with only treasures and cultivation. The black dog bared its ferocious fangs. Its emerald eyes flashed, and its pitch-black body split into 5, chasing after 5 people in 5 different directions. The 5 clones had the same aura and strength as the original body, and it was impossible to tell which direction the original body was at. However, Suyu and the others were left with only their physical bodies, and most of their strength was sealed. How could they dare to confront the black dog head-on? With a miserable groan, Dongfang Tianfeng's chest was hit by the black dog's paw. The sharp paw left a huge scratch. If Dongfang Tianfeng didn't have a defensive treasure that negated 90% of the force, the blow would have been enough to kill her. Damn dog! Dongfang Tianfeng's chest was covered with blood. She was shocked and furious. After weighing her options, she stepped on the tip of her foot and flew backward. She had chosen to escape. As she was fleeing, she took out several talismans that contained great power and threw them out. However, to her despair, the talismans were dissolved by the purification power halfway through the explosion. The power in the talismans dissipated into thin air. Shortly after, a pitch-black dog paw tore the talismans mercilessly and grabbed Dongfang Tianfeng's neck. Dongfang Tianfeng's expression changed drastically. She immediately threw out the defensive treasure that she kept close to her body. With its sturdiness, it barely managed to block 90% of the paw's power. However, her shoulder was still torn by the paw, and blood splattered all of a sudden. The agony stimulated Dongfang Tianfeng's reflexes. She immediately opened her space ring and prepared to take out some medicine to heal her injuries. However, her face paled when she realized that the spatial ring had failed halfway through its opening. Moreover, with her 9th grade almighty physique, she had a remarkable self-healing ability. But, not to mention her injuries, she had even lost the most basic ability to stop bleeding. Did you notice? Was he in despair? Here, all of you are just a bunch of ants with slightly stronger physiques than the average person. Die. The black dog sneered, and its astonishing claws tore through the air. Dongfang Tianfeng blocked with both her arms, revealing a pair of silky wrists. The dog's paw landed on it. The silk wrist blocked 80% of the force, while the remaining 20% penetrated her arm and rushed into Dongfang Tianfeng's body. With a muffled groan, Dongfang Tianfeng was blasted thousands of feet away, almost falling into the center of the mausoleum filled with the remnant souls of the mortal fairies. A starry sky prodigy ended up in such a sorry state. The rest of the people were not much better off. They were all in a sorry state. Only Suyu was able to deal with it with ease and was not injured in the slightest. "Young man, can we not play with needles?" The corners of the black dog's mouth twitched. It circled around Suyu like a wolf, but did not dare to attack. A pair of dog eyes stared fixedly at the black steel needle in Suyu's palm. The needle no longer had the strange poison of the fallen fairies on it, and it had lost its mysterious ability to travel through the void. However, once it was pierced, the damage to the soul did not disappear. The black dog lunged forward several times, but Suyu pricked its paw with the needle each time. The black dog yelped in pain. After several times, it became extremely cautious and did not dare to pounce on Suyu easily again. "If I don't play with needles, am I supposed to be tortured by you?" Suyu said playfully. The black dog felt like a dog that had bitten a hedgehog and did not know where to start. Look, there are meat buns in the sky." The black dog suddenly looked up at the sky. Suyu looked at the sky, but the steel needle in his hand pierced forward without hesitation. "Howl! Woof! Woof, 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 woof." The tragic barking of a dog followed closely. The black dog was covered by the needle in its mouth, rolling on the ground in pain and barking incessantly. Suyu's eyes flashed, and his figure moved. He took out a thumb-sized ball that was half yellow and half blue from his sleeve and suddenly threw it at the black dog. Although the black dog was in pain, it was still paying attention to Suyu's actions. Without thinking, it jumped up and sneered. "The magical powers of a magical treasure cannot be used." After saying that, it slapped its paw. However, as soon as its paw touched the ball, the black dog's expression froze, and it immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. After a tragic dog howl, the black dog was pressed to the ground by the ball. Its forelegs twitched, and it could not move. White saliva was rolling from the dog's mouth, and it cursed vaguely, "I am still too young, and I really thought that was a magical treasure." Then, with a puff, the black dog turned into a cloud of smoke. Suyu put away the underworld pearl expressionlessly. After experiencing a few times where the space ring could not be opened, Suyu was used to carrying a few light magical treasures with him. Now it was finally coming in handy. The soul-piercing ability of the steel needle and the weight of the underworld pearl were the basic attributes of the magical treasures, and were not affected by the purification of the glittering jewel fairy scepter. Just like a sharp knife, it could not be purified into an iron brick, could it? Staring at the drifting smoke of the black dog, Suyu pondered for a moment. His speculation about the glittering jewel wonderland was one step closer. Perhaps participating in the glittering jewel wonderland was a mistake in itself. Suyu sighed softly and turned to look at the others. The most miserable one was Dongfang Tianfeng. For some unknown reason, the black dog was especially ruthless towards Dongfang Tianfeng in the same pursuit. It was as if the black dog bore a grudge against Dongfang Tianfeng. "Brother Su, please lend me a hand." Bai Ling Tian saw that Suyu had successfully defeated everyone, and his face lit up with delight. Suyu turned a deaf ear to him, shrugged, and took a few steps towards Dongfang Tianfeng. Before he could take out the steel needle, the black dog shuddered and retreated, baring its teeth. The steel needle had given it an unforgettable memory. Even though it was a clone, it had the same memory. "Kid, don't ruin my plans." The black dog barked fiercely. Suyu didn't mean to save Dongfang Tianfeng, but he didn't want the black dog to succeed. Seeing that, Han Fei and Gu Taishu pondered for a moment. While fending off the black dog's frenzied attacks, they gathered by Suyu's side. Now, only Suyu could restrain the black dog. Sure enough, when they were 30 feet away from Suyu, the remaining 4 black dogs stopped in unison. They paced around the perimeter, becoming more cautious. However, the next moment, the 4 black dogs launched their attacks at the same time, attacking the 4 people from 4 different directions. Suyu waved his sleeves casually. The steel needle, the underworld pearl, and the silk thread protected Han Fei, Bai Ling Tian, and Dongfang Tianfeng. The three black dogs stopped abruptly, retreating unwillingly. Gu Taishu was the only one who groaned in pain. One of his arms had been torn off by the black dog, and blood was spurting out incessantly. Seeing that the others were protected by Su Yu, and that he was the only one who was exposed and attacked, he couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. It was obvious that Su Yu had done it on purpose, even with the intention of killing him. Sensing that Gu Taishu wasn't protected, the eyes of the four black dogs lit up. They circled around and stared at Gu Taishu with hideous smiles. "Ha ha! Pitiful worm, have you been abandoned? If that's the case, I won't hold back." With four barks, four black shadows leaped out at the same time, biting at Gu Taishu at the same time. Even though Gu Taishu had incredible magical powers, he was restrained by the glittering jewel fairy scepter. Seeing that he was about to be torn to pieces by the four black dogs, suddenly, an imperceptible silk thread streaked across the bodies of the four black dogs soundlessly. Poof, poof, poof. With four consecutive sounds of annihilation, the four black dogs were split into halves at the same time. From the glittering jewel fairy scepter, a furious voice came from underground. "Damn it, kid, you set me up." Obviously, Gu Taishu was actually a bait, luring the four black dogs into a trap so that they could be killed at the same time. Otherwise, it would have been extremely difficult to kill them one by one. With the black dog's ability to escape, this group of mortals who had lost their magical powers and treasures could never catch up. Su Yu and Gu Taishu had a grudge, which had been shown in front of the Marshal Tower. The black dog must have seen it. Now that Su Yu had used the black dog to get rid of Gu Taishu, it seemed logical, and the black dog had been careless and fallen for it. Otherwise, Su Yu could have deliberately exposed Han, Fei, Dongfang Tianfeng, and even by Ling Tian. With the black dog's cunning, it might have seen through the trap. Although Gu Taishu had escaped death, there would be plenty of opportunities to kill him when they returned to the Jiuzhou continent. There was no hurry. Knowing that he had been used as bait by Su Yu, Gu Taishu's brows flickered with a murderous look. At that moment, a plume of black smoke rose slowly and condensed into the shape of a black dog. It was the black dog that had been hiding in the dark when he was using the clone. All 5 black dogs had been destroyed, but they had not really killed it. Although it was disappointing, it was still within expectations. If the black dog could be killed so easily, it would not have been entangled with them until now. The infuriated black dog glared at the 6 of them fiercely, its murderous aura threatening. "Don't think you'll be safe and sound with this brat around. I'm indestructible in the glittering jewel wonderland. Killing me 1,000 times won't help. This brat can protect you for now, but can he protect you forever? Accept your fate and stop struggling. I'll give you a quick death." Their expressions changed. Indeed, so you couldn't protect them for long. Seeing that they were deep in thought, the black dog rolled its eyes. "Brat, I can't do anything to you, and you can't kill me either. Why don't we make a deal? If you join forces with me and get rid of the 4 of them, I'll open the 6th yard for you. Only you can enter, and all the legacies of the glittering jewel mortal fairy will belong to you alone. What do you think?" Upon hearing that, Han Fei and the others had a strange look in their eyes. What they had worried about the most had happened. The black dog had indeed taken this step. Or rather, with the black dog's cunning, it would have taken this step sooner or later. If any of them were in Su Yu's shoes, they would seriously consider the black dog's suggestion. Su Yu's relationship with them was neither friend nor foe. There was no benefit in protecting them, and it would only be a burden. On the other hand, cooperating with the black dog would bring them great benefits. They already had an answer as to how Su Yu would choose. Whoosh! In an instant, the 5 of them, who had joined forces, suddenly separated. For pairs of eyes locked onto Su Yu, extremely guarded. If Su Yu could kill the black dog, it would only be easier for him to kill them. "It's good to be careful." Su Yu smiled, fiddling with the soul-piercing needle in his palm. "But will I be fooled so easily?" The black dog's eyes flickered, and it laughed. "Are you worried that I won't keep my promise? We can sign the Book of the Heart's Oaths." However, Su Yu shook his head. "What I mean by fooled is not whether you'll keep your promise, but you're already at the end of your rope, and yet you're trying to trick me into eliminating the threat for you. Do you think I'm a fool? Chapter 1038. Who are you talking about? The black dog stood up on its hind legs and crossed its two front paws in front of its chest, showing off the muscles on its legs and baring its teeth in provocation. My physique is peerless. A single strand of hair can break 1,000 weapons. A drop of blood can destroy all living things, and a glance can behead the gods. Junior, it's fine if you insult my character, but underestimate my physique and you'll suffer a calamity. Bang. Suddenly, a bead was thrown over. The black dog had no chance to dodge, and it was flattened with all four limbs facing the sky, foaming at the mouth. Take it away. The black dog's four legs were flailing wildly, spitting saliva and struggling. Han Fei and the others looked at each other. Brother Su, you're so powerful. You've suppressed the black dog's original form so easily. Dongfang Tianfeng was dumbfounded. Han Fei and the others were also puzzled. Judging from the black dog's performance, it couldn't have been so weak after a few clones were destroyed. Of course, its original form shouldn't be so weak, but what if most of its strength was used to activate the glittering jewel fairy scepter? Suyu looked at the glittering jewel fairy scepter and said calmly, if the black dog had used the glittering jewel fairy scepter earlier and caused all the challengers to lose their magical powers and treasures, would it have been forced into a corner? Obviously, activating the glittering jewel fairy scepter required a huge price, and the black dog was unwilling to use it until the very last moment. The 5 clones of the black dog were not as simple as clones, but were formed from the black dog's remaining strength. Unexpectedly, they were all destroyed by Su Yu. As a result, the black dog's original form was extremely weak and was easily suppressed by Su Yu. The black dog was suppressed, and the glittering jewel fairy scepter lost its power support and stopped operating. The invisible waves quietly returned, and everyone withdrew their magical powers. The most troublesome martial yardmaster was finally suppressed, and the look in everyone's eyes changed. Next was the distribution of benefits. The martial yardmaster was the ticket to enter the final place of legacy of the 6th yard. The glittering jewel fairy scepter, a replica of an Emperor-based Saint artifact, was the most powerful and top-notch treasure in the Jiuzhou continent. There was no other. With it, who in the world would be its match? However, no one tried to snatch it, because there was one person who hadn't moved. Su Yu. Han Fei and the others stared at Su Yu from the corner of their eyes. Along the way, they had developed an inexplicable fear of Su Yu, a challenger whose abilities were unclear, but who had many tricks up his sleeve. It was not only his strength, but also his meticulous mind, which made them exceptionally vigilant. Now, Su Yu had his arms crossed over his chest and was motionless. He had no intention of fighting for the glittering jewel fairy scepter. Could it be that there was a conspiracy in the glittering jewel fairy scepter that they hadn't discovered yet, that Su Yu had discovered? Since the glittering jewel fairy scepter had been held by the black dog, everyone became cautious. Hey, none of you want it. Then, I won't be polite. Suddenly, Su Yu let out a playful chuckle. The looks in Han Fei and the others' eyes changed, but they still did not dare to make a move. Instead, they focused on Su Yu's figure. Once he made a move, they would dare to make a move. However, they had obviously neglected the fact that there was another person on the field. It's not bad. I'll accept it for you. Bing Wuxin's beautiful figure appeared near the glittering jewel fairy scepter in a flash. She grasped it with her jade-like hand and held it in her palm with great agility. She then waved at Su Yu, indicating that she had completed the task. I've been tricked. When Han Fei and the others realized what was going on, it was already too late. Su Yuxian, don't you think you've gone too far by toying with us like this? Han Fei said dispassionately. She looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dongfang Tianfeng, Gu Taishu, Bai Ling Tian, and the others stared at Bing Wuxin in the distance, their eyes gleaming with a strange light. Now that they had magical powers, it didn't seem like a problem for them to snatch the glittering jewel fairy scepter from Bing Wuxin's hands. Just as they were calculating in their hearts, all of a sudden, The glittering jewel fairy scepter in Bing Wuxin's hands started to crack from the inside out, covering the entire body of the fairy scepter. The glittering jewel fairy scepter is about to shatter. Bing Wuxin was taken aback. She immediately enveloped it with vital energy and held it carefully in her palms. Suyu sighed. Sure enough, it won't be so easy on us. The black dog, who was lying on all fours, couldn't help but burst out laughing triumphantly. How intelligent am I? I've taken every possibility into account. I've long predicted the outcome of being captured. Why would I leave the peerless treasure to you for nothing? This glittering jewel fairy scepter is fake. Bing Wuxin frowned. The black dog sneered. How could a fake, glittering jewel fairy scepter have such nature-defying powers? Of course it's real. It's just that I broke it years ago. You? Everyone was doubtful. A replica of an Emperor Beisan artifact was known as the #1 artifact in Jiuzhou. How could it be broken by someone? Damn dog, you're at death's door. Shouldn't you tell us your true identity? Suyu walked over and said placidly. The mysterious black dog that had appeared 9,000 years ago, the black ghost that had changed the fate of the central prefecture in one fell swoop. Who was it? Why was it in the glittering jewel wonderland? How could it change the layout of the glittering jewel mortal fairy? Ha ha! I'm a handsome, charming, and beautiful dog that everyone loves. All of a sudden, the black dog was thrashing its forelegs. Be gentle. I'll tell you. Suyu shifted his thoughts and lightened the weight of the underworld pearl. Actually, I am. The black dog took a deep breath and opened its mouth with great difficulty, preparing to reveal its identity. All of a sudden, the cry of a phoenix resounded. The black dog that had been suppressed under the underworld pearl had been replaced by a fire phoenix. Ha ha! The 6th yard has finally fallen into my hands. An unbridled and flamboyant laughter reached everyone's ears. Looking back, Dongfang Tianfeng was laughing wildly with the black dog in her hand. There was a hint of madness in her laughter that had been suppressed for a long time. At first glance, it gave off a ferocious vibe. Compared to the girl next door, Dongfang Tianfeng, it was a world of difference. Wait, what do you mean by the 6th yard? Gu Taishu raised his brows and asked. Wasn't the 6th yard only accessible to everyone who held the position of yardmaster? Why was capturing the black dog equivalent to controlling the 6th yard? However, they soon realized that something was amiss. It was also Dongfang Tianfeng who had told them that holding the position of yardmaster meant holding the right to control the 6th yard. They had been tricked. A bunch of fools. Don't you understand where the 6th yard is? Dongfang Tianfeng waved the black dog in her hand, her face full of sarcasm. The black dog was the 6th yard? Otherwise, where did you think he got the glittering jewel fairy scepter? Where did the crystal ball he spat out come from? The 6th yard, of course. The final place of legacy. Dongfang Tianfeng revealed the truth. Actually, the 6th yard is in its stomach. To open the 6th yard, it doesn't need the 5-yard masters, but only the fresh blood of the great Oriental family. Dongfang Tianfeng's lips curled into a cold smile. She bit her finger, and a drop of her blood fell on the top of the black dog's head. All of a sudden, the black dog collapsed and turned into a cloud of smoke. Immediately, the smoke condensed into a gigantic, pitch-black door. The giant door seemed both real and illusory, leading to a pitch-black world of billowing demonic energy. The 6th yard was open just like that. You should understand now. The rumor about the 6th yard was, of course, spread by the great Oriental family. Otherwise, how would you believe it? Suyu stroked his chin and retreated quietly. However, he had only retreated a few steps when his expression changed slightly. An invisible wall of demonic energy had shrouded an area of 1,000 feet. Looking at Han Fei and the others, they also sensed something strange and tried to break the wall of demonic energy, but to no avail. Don't waste your energy. This is the barrier of the 6th yard, the final cage that imprisons the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Even she can't escape, let alone you guys. Dongfang Tianfeng revealed another shocking fact. Suyu's eyes flickered. Sure enough, This was the nature of the glittering jewel wonderland. What cage are you talking about? Also, what's the matter with the glittering jewel mortal fairy being imprisoned? Han Fei's indifferent face was filled with shock. Dongfang Tianfeng chuckled. Although you're stalling for time, it's still very interesting to disseminate the secrets of the world to a bunch of ignorant people like you. The glittering jewel wonderland isn't a place for training at all, but a cage. The sixth yard is a cell within a cage. The one imprisoned here is none other than the guardian of Jiuzhou, the glittering jewel mortal fairy, whom everyone in the Jiuzhou continent teleports to. The 5-yard masters are the keys to open the cell. The earth-shattering news subverted everyone's understanding. The glittering jewel mortal fairy passed away and left behind all her legacy to benefit her descendants. How could she be imprisoned? Gu Taishu scoffed. Dongfang Tianfeng sneered and shook her head. Compared to Su Yuxian, you're not just a little bit lacking, am I right, Brother Su? You've already guessed something, haven't you? Everyone cast doubtful glances at him. Su couldn't help but sigh and shake his head. I've only guessed a little. The glittering jewel mortal fairy has guarded the continent for many years. If she really had an heir, she would have set it up before she passed away. Why would she go through so much trouble to set up such a huge wonderland and pass it on to her descendants little by little before her death? Such a way to benefit her descendants is too risky. How could she guarantee that the wonderland wouldn't be taken advantage of by her enemies after her death? She might as well choose the outstanding talents of the present generation that she had taken a liking to. Only then would the legacy be meaningful. Therefore, I've always had doubts about the theory that the glittering jewel wonderland is a place of legacy. It wasn't until I experienced several yards that I finally understood. The 5 great yards are not so much yards, but rather 5 great seals that suppress something. To be sealed and suppressed by such painstaking efforts, there shouldn't be anyone else but the glittering jewel mortal fairy, the number 1 mortal fairy in the world. Of course, these are all speculations without any proof. Clap. Dongfang Tianfeng applauded with appreciation. You've speculated to this extent with only a few clues. The Dongfang family combined the Jiuzhou booklet, the information from ancient times, and the painstaking efforts of several generations to calculate the true face of the glittering jewel wonderland. That's right, it's a cage. The one imprisoned is the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Everyone was shocked speechless after hearing such shocking information. Don't be surprised. In fact, the 9 great prefectures' kings, the severed fairy cliffmaster, and some others already know the truth. They just don't dare to make it public, Dongfang Tianfeng said. Gu Taishu said, You still haven't answered. Hasn't the glittering jewel mortal fairy passed away? Why was she suppressed? Who was the one who suppressed her? She was the number 1 mortal fairy in the world. Who could suppress her? Dongfang Tianfeng sneered. Who told you that she passed away? Is there any clear record of the source of this information in any ancient book? No, it's all the speculation of the later generations after the arrival of the glittering jewel wonderland. Over time, it's regarded as the truth. As for the last few questions, you're wrong about 2 of them. When she was suppressed, she was not the number 1 mortal fairy in the world, but a god. After countless years of cultivation, she became a god. And the one who suppressed her was, of course, a god. What? Everyone was shocked once again. The glittering jewel mortal fairy became a god. Moreover, it was another god who suppressed her. Why? Why did that god suppress the glittering jewel god? Was it because she was protecting Jiuzhou? Han Fei probed. However, Dongfang Tianfeng asked an unexpected question. Who told you that the glittering jewel mortal fairy was protecting Jiuzhou? Did you see it with your own eyes, or did you hear it with your own ears? Han Fei was speechless. Of course, it was spread by word of mouth. She can't be the protector of the Jiuzhou continent, because her real body is the demon race. Dongfang Tianfeng threw out another shocking secret. The so-called protection of Jiuzhou by her is, in fact, an illusion. She defeated the invading demon race and protected Jiuzhou from then on, becoming the protector of Jiuzhou. What a beautiful and touching story. Dongfang Tianfeng laughed coldly. But has anyone ever thought about where she came from? Why would she protect Jojo for no reason? As a mortal fairy, is it possible for her to help others without benefiting herself? How could there be such a coincidence in the world? When a human race was in danger, a top powerhouse between a mortal fairy and a god happened to pass by, save Jojo, and protect Jojo without hesitation. According to my family's deduction, judging from the traces of the glittering jewel mortal fairy's attack, the divine path she took was faith. So how did she gain faith? She gave us the answer, and was worshipped as the protector by billions of creatures in Jojo. At this point, everyone seemed to have seen the conspiracy that had taken place ages ago. In order to gain faith, a demon who was about to break through to the divine state put on a heroic act of saving the people of Jojo. In fact, there were many flaws in the story. As Dongfang Tianfeng said, it was too coincidental, too selfless, and too great. However, the people of later generations were in awe of the demon race. Even though they knew there were suspicious points, they pretended not to know. After being shocked for a long time, everyone was a little thirsty. So, who suppressed the glittering jewel demon god? This was also a question that they were extremely concerned about. Dongfang Tianfeng had a desolate look on her face. A god, Jojo's god, Lord Sacred Kylan. There's a god in Jojo. Jojo is actually a world created by Lord Sacred Kylan. To put it simply, it's a cavern world, Dongfang Tianfeng said. So he was shocked. Creating a world? It sounded controversial, but he had seen a piece of history with his own eyes. Shun Yichen sacrificed his body, evolved thousands of creatures, and recreated the Zhenlong continent. Could it be that Shun Yichen also had a divine state? Every god has their own cavern world. The Jojo continent is Lord Sacred Kylan's cavern world, Dongfang Tianfeng said with admiration. Then, the only one who can suppress the glittering jewel demon god is the Jojo god, Sacred Kylan. Everyone was extremely excited after hearing this. Why didn't Sacred Kylan stop the glittering jewel mortal fairy from absorbing the faith of all living beings? Why did he only take action after she became a god? Where is she now? Upon hearing this, Dongfang Tianfeng's face darkened. Although Sacred Kylan is a god, he is only one person. The number of gods in the demon race is far beyond what Sacred Kylan can handle. Therefore, he had no choice but to agree to let the glittering jewel mortal fairy absorb the power of faith. However, after the glittering jewel mortal fairy became a demon god, she prepared to refine the Jojo continent into a treasure. The condition was that the Jojo god would sacrifice the creatures of Jojo. Sacred Kylan had no choice but to resist and fight. In the end, this cage is the final result. Obviously, Sacred Kylan failed to kill the glittering jewel demon god. Sacred Kylan never showed up again, I'm afraid. Perhaps the price of the battle back then was the death of Sacred Kylan. So, you're opening the last cell now to release the glittering jewel demon god? Suyu's gaze sharpened. If what Dongfang Tianfeng said was true, what she was about to do now was too unfathomable. Combined with the rumors that the 6th yard was the final place of legacy from Dongfang Tianfeng, Suyu's heart sank. Chapter 1039. The world-renowned Great Oriental family was actually the descendant of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. No wonder the Dongfang family possessed a secret that was never recorded in history. However, if she was the descendant of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, what else could she do by opening the 6th yard and the final cell? Release the ancestor, the glittering jewel demon god. Now that the Sacred Kylan had fallen, the glittering jewel demon god had appeared. When the 9 prefectures could stop him, Dongfang Tianfeng, do you want to release the glittering jewel demon god and bring harm to the people of Jojo? Han Fei shouted coldly. She was secretly gathering power to activate the heavenly demon Black Sunday. However, Dongfang Tianfeng's expression turned cold. Release her? How could this be? Since the birth of the Dongfang family, our only mission has been to destroy the glittering jewel demon god. Opening the prison cell is only to send him to his grave. The sudden turn of events stunned everyone. You should have heard of the curse of the great Oriental family, Dongfang Tianfeng said faintly. Curse? Suyu had read many ancient books, and he did remember some relevant descriptions. The great Oriental family controlled the history of the 9 states and knew too many secrets. They had violated some taboos and were punished. In the Dongfang family, there were only women and no men. As long as a boy was born, he or she would die before the age of 9. The great Oriental family didn't have any men, only women. Even the 2 mortal fairies in the world were women. If that was all there was to it, it would have been fine. The most miserable thing was that the women of the Dongfang family only had 1/10 of an ordinary person's lifespan, so they aged very quickly. Without martial arts, girls would die of old age at the age of 10. The lifespan of those who practiced martial arts was also limited in this way. Many of the girls from the Dongfang family who looked to be 45 years old were actually only 18 or 19 years old. Once a martial artist's body deteriorated, it would be much more difficult to cultivate. Under this vicious cycle, unless one's talent was extremely outstanding, they would all die young. Dongfang Tianfeng looked like a normal young girl, but in fact, it was rare to see one in 100 years. The real Dongfang family was cursed, and most of them were old and miserable. In order to continue the family line, the Dongfang family had no choice but to recruit the young talents of the continent and work hard to reproduce. If one's aptitude wasn't considered outstanding, the clan would arrange the heavy responsibility of reproduction. She had intercourse with one man after another and gave birth to new offspring. The cycle continued until she grew old and died. Therefore, in some ancient texts, the Dongfang family was known as the brothel family. Almost none of the members of the family had the same father. Such a vicious curse had plagued the Dongfang family for 10,000 years. As a woman, Han Fei's eyes occasionally showed some tenderness. How tragic was the fate of being reduced to breeding animals. Do you know where the curse comes from? Dongfang Tianfeng asked coldly. Could it be the glittering jewel demon god? That's right, the glittering jewel demon god. Dongfang Tianfeng was filled with a murderous aura. Back then, before she died, she left her descendants behind. It wasn't to continue the goodwill of her descendants, but to continue herself with the lives of her descendants. Even if one becomes a god, there will be an end to one's life. Moreover, the seal of the glittering jewel wonderland is maintained by constantly absorbing the life of the glittering jewel demon god. Under normal circumstances, according to the design of the sacred Kailan, time is enough to absorb all of its life force and obliterate it. However, the descendants she left in the 9 regions have delayed her death. Through her bloodline, she continuously extracted the life force of her descendants to prolong her immortality. This was the reason why the members of the Dongfang family were so short-lived. It's not the curse of heaven and earth, but the curse of our ancestors. The more the Dongfang family multiplied, the more life force the glittering jewel demon god extracted, and the more she could delay her death. Only the demon clan could torture their descendants like this. Or perhaps she had never regarded the Dongfang family, who had the same face as humans, as her descendants. Only by killing her can the curse of the Dongfang family be lifted. Dongfang Tianfeng's murderous aura was shocking, and her face had a morbid ferocity. The Dongfang family has waited for so long, and finally, an unprecedented opportunity has presented itself. What opportunity? Han Fei asked curiously. Dongfang Tianfeng said, perhaps you were born in the current flourishing age, so you didn't realize it. In the last 20 years, there have been many geniuses, comparable to the flourishing age of the past. There has never been an era like the present, where peerless geniuses have sprung up. The Dongfang family has been monitoring the 9 regions since ancient times, and only then have we caught a glimpse of this abnormal, flourishing age. Han Fei was puzzled. Even so, what does this mean? It's hard for you to imagine the suppression that the glittering jewel demon god exerted on the 9 regions. When one reaches the realm of gods, A single thought can affect the reproduction and cultivation of billions of people. It was she who suppressed the prosperity of the 9 regions, causing the geniuses to be weaker generation after generation. Now, there has never been so many proud and arrogant heaven rulers. There is only one possibility. She is no longer able to suppress the 9 regions. What could be the reason for her inability to suppress the 9 regions? Dongfang Tianfeng said coldly. The reason, of course, was that the glittering jewel demon god had been sealed for so long and had been extremely weak. Therefore, the 9 regions had been suppressed for so long, and that was why so many heaven rulers had erupted. If that's the case, why not wait any longer? There's no need to take the risk, Suyu said. Dongfang Tianfeng shook her head. You may not know this, but unless the source god is destroyed, a god will not perish no matter how weak she is. As long as she is alive, the curse of the Dongfang family will never disappear. Are you sure you can destroy the source god? Suyu asked. He had come into contact with a dying god, the ancient bronze tree god. Even a corpse would find it difficult to move an inch in front of it, let alone destroy the so-called source god. Dongfang Tianfeng was full of confidence. Don't worry. How could I come unprepared? Swoosh! A sharp remnant horn appeared in her palm. The remnant horn was pitch black, and at first glance, it looked like an ordinary object. However, upon closer inspection, it felt like there was another universe hidden within the remnant horn. There was an indescribable majesty to it. An indescribable sense of worship surged in his heart. This is a relic of a god. This familiar feeling of worship immediately reminded Suyu of the ancient bronze tree god. Dongfang Tianfeng's eyes showed a hint of surprise, and she immediately nodded. That's strange. You seem to know a lot of things. That's right, this is a relic of a god, a remnant horn of the sacred Cauldron. Hearing that it was the sacred Cauldron, everyone's expression changed dramatically. Back then, the sacred Cauldron and the glittering jewel demon god had a great battle, and the sacred Cauldron was defeated. Before it died, it sealed the glittering jewel demon god, and the corpse of the sacred Cauldron disappeared. The Dongfang family spent a long time to finally find its remnant horn from the forbidden area of the barren land of the far west. It contains the divine power of the sacred Cauldron, and this is the only thing that could destroy the source god of the glittering jewel demon god. In this world, there will never be a second one. So, this is the only chance to kill the glittering jewel demon god. Staring at the remnant horn of the sacred Cauldron, everyone's hearts were in turmoil. The Dongfang family had prepared for this day for a long time. After a long silence, Suyu said, If that's the case, why didn't you tell us earlier? Why go through so much trouble? If Suyu hadn't saved her, she would have almost died at the hands of the black dog. If she had told them the truth earlier, as people of Jiuzhou, how could they not help her? She seemed to be guarding against something. It's not that simple. Dongfang Tianfeng shook her head. First of all, without my blood to open the 6th yard, would you believe me? Second, and the reason why the Dongfang family and I have always kept it a secret, Dongfang Tianfeng glanced at Suyu and the others closely. According to the intelligence of the Dongfang family, there is a very terrifying existence among the challengers this time. During the test of the glittering jewel wonderland 100 years ago, a trace of godly spirit was brought out of the wonderland. That trace of godly spirit, if I'm not mistaken, should be the godly spirit that was separated from the glittering jewel demon god. The Dongfang family detected this unusual fluctuation and roughly guessed the intention of the glittering jewel demon god. She was going to use this godly spirit to give birth to an invincible heaven ruler in the Jiuzhou continent. Don't doubt it. The godly spirit is the source of the gods, the supreme power that can create a cave. If it was used to create a single individual, how powerful would it be? Can you imagine? Hearing this, everyone's heart skipped a beat, and they thought of one person at the same time. The born emperor, Zhang Wushuang. Invincible in the world, could there be a second person besides him? However, Zhang Wushuang had already left the glittering jewel wonderland and had never touched the final cell. In other words, The person who was born from the godly spirit of the glittering jewel demon god was someone else. This person must be extremely powerful, able to suppress all the challengers, so that he could eliminate all obstacles and release the glittering jewel demon god. Dongfang Tianfeng looked around at Su Yu and the others, full of vigilance. You must be the top geniuses of the world. The incarnation of the glittering jewel demon, god born from the godly spirit, is among you. So, before this, I couldn't reveal any of my true intentions, Dongfang Tianfeng said, the corners of her mouth gradually revealing a smile. As Dongfang Tianfeng spoke, a smile gradually appeared at the corner of her lips. However, it doesn't matter now because all of you have a yard master. So you frowned. The yard master has a sealing effect on the living creatures born from the godly spirit, right? In response, Dongfang Tianfeng praised exactly. The 5 great yards, the 5 great seals, and the yard master is the core of the seal. Bringing it along with you is equivalent to being sealed. As long as any of you is a living creature born from the godly spirit, you will be sealed, and you will not be able to stop me. It was indescribable to plot to this extent. It turned out that this was the purpose of the great Oriental family, spreading rumors about the yard masters, to trick the living creatures born from the godly spirit into capturing a yard master and sealing it. Since that living creature was known to be invincible in the world, capturing one or even more yard masters would be a piece of cake. In order to open the 6th yard, that living creature would definitely do so. Even if they fell into the trap, Su Yu and the others had nothing to say. Although I don't know which one of you is the living creature born from the godly spirit, you can't stop me anymore. Dongfang Tianfeng let out a long laugh. She opened her wrist and sprinkled fresh blood onto the giant door that was filled with demonic energy. The final prison cell appeared. Buzz, buzz, heaven and earth trembled. From the depths of the dark passageway of the giant door, the clanging sound of chains being dragged could be heard. An indistinct behemoth was slowly being dragged out. Vaguely, it was a pitch-black cage. Within the cage, the glittering jewel demon god should be sealed. The glittering jewel demon god, your doomsday is here. Dongfang Tianfeng's face was distorted from excitement, and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. Chapter 1040. His pupils dilated continuously as he fell into a daze and shock. When Su Yu and the others looked over, they were shocked beyond words. It was a cage made of pitch-black scales, and the scales were filled with divine power. It was very similar to the horned fragment. If he was not mistaken, the sacred Qilin must have used its own scales to build this prison cell. However, at this moment, a huge hole had been blasted open on one side of the cage. The cage was empty, and there was no one inside. How is this possible? Why was the prison broken? Where did the glittering jewel demon god go? Fear gradually filled Dongfang Tianfeng's face. The glittering jewel demon god, who was thought to be weak and dying, had actually escaped from the cell. Could it be that she was somewhere in the fairyland? Looks like you've all been deceived by her. Su Yu sighed, his expression grave. I'm afraid that 100 years ago, the great Oriental family detected a trace of the fluctuation of the source of celestial energy sphere. In fact, it was the actual body of the glittering jewel demonic god that escaped. You're a full 100 years late. Pata! The remnant of the horn in Dongfang Tianfeng's hand fell to the ground powerlessly. Her entire body went limp, and she fell to the ground. Her eyes were blank, and she could not stop muttering, "It's over." She will definitely seek revenge on the Dongfang family. Everyone is finished. It's not over. We still have a chance. A voice penetrated Dongfang Tianfeng's soul and woke her up. Looking at the face with the silver mask, Dongfang Tianfeng's eyes were filled with gloom and bitterness. The glittering jewel demon god had escaped. Who could stop her? She got out of trouble 100 years ago. Why didn't she immediately attack the 9 regions? She had been trapped for ages because of the 9 regions. So how could she not have any resentment? There was only one answer. She, for the time being, did not have the ability to destroy the 9 regions. In other words, most of her abilities are still trapped in the glittering jewel wonderland. Suyu's eyes shone brightly as he voiced his speculation. Everyone's eyes lit up. Indeed, no one would be willing to leave after being trapped for 10,000 years. She hadn't made a move for 100 years, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't have the ability to. This should have something to do with her escaping back then. Perhaps a considerable part of her strength was used to break out of the cage. Thus, her main body didn't dare to rashly stir up trouble after escaping. The glittering jewel wonderland relies on absorbing the glittering jewel demon god's life force to sustain itself. In the past 100 years, it was still operating. This means that the glittering jewel demon god did not escape completely. At least a part of it is still sealed. This time, her real body must have come to the glittering jewel wonderland to retrieve her final sealed body. Therefore, Schwa. The people on the scene retreated at the same time and were extremely vigilant of each other. The real body of the glittering jewel demon god was among them, the greatest genius in the world. There was only one person who didn't move at all and was questioned by the crowd. Su Yuxian, could be you? Dongfang Tianfeng stared at Suyu. Judging from his endless tricks, he was simply too suitable for the identity of the glittering jewel demonic god. Suyu smiled. As a deity, the glittering jewel demonic god is so noble. No matter how he disguises himself, he won't appear as a man, right? Schwa. Pairs of eyes shot toward Han Fei in unison. The most dazzling geniuses in the world were none other than the four great starry sky geniuses. Dongfang Tianfeng could be ruled out as one of the women. There was only one left, Han Fei. The genius of the demonic path was extremely talented. He was the best candidate to hide the identity of the glittering jewel demonic god. I'm not, Han Fei said indifferently, disdaining to explain. Dongfang Tianfeng narrowed her eyes. You think you're not? Now that you've been sealed by the Yardmaster, you can't use your abilities as a demonic god, can you? Traces of murderous intent shot out from her eyes. The rest of them were ready to strike as well. Han Fei was indeed too suspicious. In the whole of the glittering jewel wonderland, there was no other possible person besides her. It's not her, Suyu said nonchalantly, with no intention of striking. Huh? Dongfang Tianfeng looked suspicious. You seem to know who it is. Suyu's lips curled into a self-deprecating smile. I'm too stupid to not know who is even now, am I right? Bing Wuqing? His gaze was cast in the direction of the Marshall Tower. Huh? Who else had yet to show up? All of a sudden, a piercingly cold, brutal, and savage aura descended with a loud crash. You're worthy of being the one I fancied. In contrast, there was a soft and melodious voice, like the sound of a spring breeze. On the horizon, two figures descended through the void. One of them was dressed in black, with dark skin and a mark of a blood-red moon between his brows. The corners of his mouth were curled upwards, as if he was smiling evilly. An unsettling, brutal aura emanated from him. A cool breeze blew past, and waves of blood-red mist rose from his body, drifting towards Su Yu and the others. It reeked of blood. The person standing beside him was none other than Bing Wuqing, who had disappeared without a trace after entering the glittering jewel wonderland. The demon-devouring emperor. Han Fei and Dongfang Tianfeng recognized him immediately. Their expressions changed subtly, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The genius who ranked second among the four great starry sky elites, the demon-devouring emperor. The rising star of martial arts, the most brutal, bloodthirsty, and the most terrifying existence. However, the one they were truly fearful of was the woman named Bing Wuqing. The dignified, demon-devouring emperor was following a strange woman who bore a striking resemblance to Bing Wuxin, who stood beside Su Yu. The demon-devouring emperor they knew had no parents, no ability, and no friends at all. Furthermore, the demon-devouring emperor was standing half a step behind Bing Wuqing, vaguely acknowledging her as his leader. Who are you? Dongfang Tianfeng berated. Bing Wuqing's appearance was unexpected. A very bad feeling welled up in Dongfang Tianfeng's heart. Bing Wuqing looked over indifferently, a beautiful smile on her face. Me? Am I not the ancestor that you descendants have been trying to kill for 10,000 years? Upon hearing that, Dongfang Tianfeng's pupil shrank. Her whole body trembled, and she cried out involuntarily, "Ah, you are the glittering jewel demon god." Bing Wuqing said calmly, "Very disappointed, right?" After experiencing fear and shock, Dongfang Tianfeng gradually calmed down. You didn't capture any yard masters because you already knew the intentions of the Dongfang family? Do you think the original body of the glittering jewel demon god wouldn't understand the fact that the yard masters are the core of the seal? Bing Wuqing asked calmly. Dongfang Tianfeng's face was pale, and she bit her lips. One miscalculation led to a series of mistakes. If it was a creature born from the source of God, it would be impossible for it to know the true purpose of the yard masters. However, the original body had been sealed for thousands of years. How could it not know? So, I've wasted my efforts? Dongfang Tianfeng suddenly felt gloomy and hopeless. Bing Wuqing shook her head lightly. How could that be? Although the plan was shallow, it still helped your ancestor quite a bit. Thanks to you guys for helping me find the carrier of the yard masters. Otherwise, it would have been really difficult for me to get them to carry the yard masters willingly. Bing Wuqing smiled lightly. Dongfang Tianfeng's expression changed, as if she had realized something. Her whole body trembled with anger. You're using us. There is only one way for Bing Wuqing to break the seal of the glittering jewel wonderland, and that was to destroy all 5 yard masters at the same time. This was the arrangement of the sacred Kylin. The death of any yard master would immediately lead to the birth of a new yard master. This could prevent the accidental death of a yard master from causing the cage of the glittering jewel wonderland to shatter. Unless all 5 yard masters were killed at the same time, the glittering jewel wonderland would never shatter, and the glittering jewel demon god would never be able to escape. However, the Dongfang family's strange arrangement had gathered all 5 yard masters. This was equivalent to giving Bing Wuqing a chance to destroy the seal. Realizing that what she had done not only failed to destroy the glittering jewel demon god, but also indirectly gave the glittering jewel demon god a chance to escape completely, Dongfang Tianfeng couldn't help but look up and laugh. There was a desolate sob in her laughter. We're really the stupidest race in the world. We released our eternal enemy with our own hands. With a bitter smile, Dongfang Tianfeng wiped away her tears. Her eyes were resolute as she raised the Qilint's remnant horn in her hand and took a step towards Bing Wuqing, ready to fight to the death. The Qilint's remnant horn, which contained divine power, was prepared to destroy the glittering jewel demon god's godly spirit. It was the only weapon in the world that could kill her. Dongfang Tianfeng had no other choice but to try. However, at this moment, a remnant shadow flashed by, flickering with incomparable brutality and murderous intent. Immediately after, Dongfang Tianfeng's figure flew backward with blood, and the scene of the Qilint's remnant horn being caught by a blood-red palm. Hee, you dare to attack my master? You deserve to die. The demon-devouring emperor licked the blood on his palm, revealing a bloody sneer. After he finished speaking, he offered the horn with both hands. Bing Wuqing raised her hand, and the Qilint's remnant horn flew into her palm. As soon as it entered her palm, the Qilint's remnant horn seemed to respond. Its whole body was as red as a burning piece of iron, roasting Bing Wuqing's palm with traces of demonic energy. You've been dead for 10,000 years, yet you still refuse to rest in peace? Bing Wuqing smiled slightly. With a clench of her palm, the only weapon that could kill her turned into an elite radiance, scattering in all directions. Dongfang Tianfeng, who was flying backward, witnessed the scene. My family. I'm sorry, everyone. The hideous wound on her abdomen had almost penetrated her entire body. Even if Bing Wuqing hadn't attacked, she would have died in the fairy realm. I really can't accept this. Dongfang Tianfeng murmured one last time before she closed her eyes. However, She didn't feel the pain of crashing into the ground as she had imagined. Instead, she felt a strong arm that dissolved the impact and gently landed on the ground. At the same time, a drop of aura full of vitality entered her nose. She forced her eyes open, and a silver mass came into view. At the same time, a drop of elite liquid fell on her lips. She opened her mouth subconsciously. As the liquid entered her mouth, it immediately turned into warm energy and nourished the wound. The horrifying wound on her abdomen recovered rapidly. The fountain of life. Having saved her life, Dongfang Tianfeng forced a smile and sighed faintly. This is good stuff. So you let go of her and sighed. Miss Dongfang, why kill yourself before you reach the last step? With the great Oriental family's resources, how could they not have a healing elixir equivalent to the fountain of life? She didn't use it because she felt that it was no longer necessary. Thank you. Dongfang Tianfeng's eyelashes drooped. Her face was ashen, and she looked like a puppet that had lost its soul. Anyone who had encountered such a drastic change would have found it hard to bear. Hee. Junior brother Su is still as tender as ever. I can't help but envy you. Bing Wuqing smiled sweetly, her face as beautiful as a painting. Chapter 1041. The sigh came from the bottom of his heart. The freshness and amazement from their first meeting had all faded into the past. They could no longer return to their relationship as fellow apprentices in the Red Blood Palace. Huh? Bing Wuqing laughed softly. Junior brother Su, if you're willing to follow me, you can return to the realm of demons and rebuild the Red Blood Palace. You and I will still be fellow apprentices. I actually admire you. The realm of demons? What kind of place was that? Things remain the same, but people have changed. I appreciate your kindness, Su Yu said lightly. If Palace Master Emo knew your identity, she would be very sad. After all, you are her only apprentice. However, Bing Wuqing shook her head gently. She already knew. What? This was a huge shock. Mo Tianxian already knew Bing Wuqing's true identity. If that was the case, why do you think I haven't attacked Jiuzhou after escaping for 100 years? It's not that I don't want to, it's that I can't, Bing Wuqing said. Can't. Could it be, yes, she accepted me as an apprentice in the name of teaching, but in fact, she is monitoring me. She will kill me if I make a move, Bing Wuqing said. Most of my abilities are restricted in the glittering jewel wonderland, and I am at my weakest. She can easily kill me. So you found it unbelievable. If she knows you are the glittering jewel demonic god, why monitor you? Why not kill you? In Su Yu's impression, Mo Tianxian was a loner and rarely cared about what the outside world thought. Sheltering the glittering jewel demonic god was not her style. Because of a promise, Bing Wuqing looked at Bing Wuxin and said leisurely, there is only one person who could make a promise that could change Mo Tianxuan's style. 100 years ago, the prefecture king of the Red Blood Palace, Jian Wuxing, the prefecture king of the lifeless sword prefecture, Jian Wuxing. It was her. 100 years ago, she broke through the barrier and became the Sword King. 100 years ago, wasn't it the time when Jian Wuxing participated in the glittering jewel wonderland? Do you know that Bing Wuxin and I studied in the Red Blood Palace? Bing Wuxing asked. Su Yu was silent for a while. He knew Bing Wuxin's family background when he first entered the Demon Mountain. He knew that no one dared to provoke her. Although no one mentioned it, it was not difficult to speculate. When Bing Wuxin announced her engagement to Su Yu, she had said that her mother would come to inspect him. It could be said that Bing Wuxin's mother was the key reason why her background was feared. There were many famous women on the continent, but there was only one woman who was willing to send her daughter to the Red Blood Palace, which wasn't that powerful. The prefecture's king from the Red Blood Palace, Jian Wuxing. Are you Jian Wuxing's daughters? Su Yu asked. Bing Wuxing nodded, but then shook her head. We have indeed come to the Red Blood Palace to further our studies in the name of her daughter. In fact, I am not her real daughter. Of course not. One was a demon, and the other was a prefecture king of the 9 states. However, I was indeed born from her womb. However, Bing Wuxing revealed another surprising piece of news. 100 years ago, when she was training in the glittering jewel wonderland, she mistakenly consumed a spirit fruit. The spirit fruit contained the godly spirit that I had escaped from. By freak accident, I was also brought out of the glittering jewel wonderland. I was born in her belly and became her daughter. Suyu was dumbfounded by such a bizarre story. Suyu frowned. If Mo Tianxian could see through your real body, there's no reason Jian Wuxing, who gave birth to you, couldn't see through your essence. Why didn't she kill you? Because I was her real daughter. Bing Wuxing looked at Bing Wuxin, who was beside her. Bing Wuxin's face was livid, and she was glaring at Bing Wuxing with hatred. At that time, Jian Wuxing was pregnant with her real child, Bing Wuxin. After that, my celestial source entered her belly, and by chance my celestial source actually fused with the fetus, becoming twins of the same root. She shared my celestial source and obtained an unprecedented and shocking spiritual body while I shared her life. If I died, she would also die immediately. Although Jian Wuxing was an emperor among humans, she was also a mother. She couldn't kill her own child with her own hands, but she couldn't ignore me, a demon, either. So, she entrusted Wuxin and me to Mo Tianquan surveillance. She asked her to act according to circumstances, and if I had any ill intentions, she could kill me. Suyu suddenly understood. No wonder Bing Wuxin and Bing Wuxing's souls were one. This question had puzzled him for a long time. It turned out that they were of the same origin. He finally understood why Bing Wuxin was so hostile toward Bing Wuxing, and why Bing Wuxing could always suppress Bing Wuxin. However, Mo Tianxian isn't an indecisive person. I'm curious why she didn't kill you with a sword. Suyu knew Mo Tianquan's character very well. She would never let go of the glittering jewel demonic god, a great demon, just because of a few romantic relationships. Bing Wuxing shook her head calmly. Actually, even I don't know why. I thought I would die at Mo Tianquan's hands, but after so many years, she never made a move. Although she had a few murderous intentions, she didn't seem to take me seriously. As she spoke, Bing Wuxing couldn't help but say, I've never seen through her for so many years. There's a mystery about her that even I can't see through. So you couldn't help but be stunned to hear a demon that had been hidden for ages say that she was mysterious. In fact, after experiencing the Marshall Tower and seeing the virtual image left by Mo Tianxian 300 years ago, so you also felt that Mo Tianxian had hidden herself very well. The realm of the undying sword body was really well hidden. Anyway, she let me in just like that. Bing Wuxing shrugged. Looking around at the crowd again, Bing Wuxing said placidly, I've said what I need to say. Now I'm in dire need of manpower, so I'll give you a chance. Pledge your allegiance to me, and after I retrieve all my power and reforge my divine body, I'll allow you to follow me. You should be able to imagine the benefits of following me without me telling you. Becoming mortal fairies is just a matter of time. Upon hearing that, the crowd was tempted. Mortal fairies, apart from Zhan Wushuang, who among them could be sure that they could become mortal fairies? Bing Wuxing's offer was tempting. This was probably the reason why the demon-devouring emperor had acknowledged Bing Wuxing as his master. Can you believe a single word of the demon's words? Dongfang Tianfeng sneered. Han Fei and the others were not tempted at all. The temptation of a mortal fairy was indeed shocking, but the promise of a demon was extraordinary. Firstly, the demon might not keep his promise. Secondly, once they agreed, it would be equivalent to betraying the human race. On the contrary, if they joined forces and killed Bing Wuxing, they would be able to solve the great threat of Jiuzhou. Would they be afraid that the Jiuzhou continent would mistreat them? Haha, looks like I have to show you something. Bing Wuxing smiled calmly, raised her slender fingers, and pointed at the crowd. Suddenly, a terrifying force descended from the sky. Han Fei and the others' expressions changed drastically, and they quickly activated their vital qi to resist the force descending from the sky. However, in the face of this force, they were as weak as ants. Their strength was like a stone sinking into the sea, constantly suppressed by the force descending from the sky. Their bodies went from standing straight to half-squatting, and from half-squatting to kneeling in the end. Mortal. Mortal fairy strength. You're at the mortal fairy realm. Impossible. How did you enter the glittering jewel wonderland? The restriction of this place is only those below the almighty level. Dongfang Tianfeng's face was drenched in cold sweat, and she was shocked. Bing Wuqing said calmly, I've been trapped for ages, and I know this cage like the back of my hand. What's so difficult about finding a loophole? Her opponent was actually the mortal fairy realm. Their plans were all in vain. What other choice did they have against a mortal fairy? I agree, Gu Taishu said, gritting his teeth. Bing Wuqing smiled faintly. All right, once the body of 9 spirits is perfected, it's a pretty good constitution. What about you guys? Do you want to die? Or do you want to submit? What else could they do? They had no other choice. Han Fei and Bai Ling Tian lowered their heads one after another. Only Su Yu and Dongfang Tianfeng were still struggling. Glancing at Dongfang Tianfeng with indifference, Bing Wuqing's gaze fell on Su Yu, and her face was full of regret. Actually, you're the one I want the most. Su Yu sighed. Forgive me for not being able to agree, but I can't betray my own race, just like I couldn't betray the Xinlong continent in the past. Jojo had people he wanted to protect, and Su Yu couldn't destroy them together with the glittering, jeweled demonic god. Bing Wuqing was silent for a long time and sighed softly. What a pity. I admire you very much, but if I can't get the person I admire, then no one else can. Being admired by the demonic god was enough to prove that he had merits worthy of the demonic god's attention. If he became an enemy, his merits would become a thorny problem. I'm sorry, junior brother Su. Bing Wuqing, as her name suggested, seemed to be affectionate, but was actually merciless. With a point of her finger, all the power of the heavens fell upon Su Yu. However, she didn't strike immediately. Before that, break the seal first. If you die, it won't be easy to find another body for the flower yardmaster, Bing Wuqing said placidly. With a light wave of her sleeves, Su Yu was fixed in place by the mortal fairy's strength, unable to move. At the same time, Han Fei, Gu Taishu, and Bai Ling Tian were all teleported to Su Yu's side. Finally, even Dongfang Tianfeng was teleported over. The 5 of them formed a circle surrounding Bing Wuqing in the center. It looked like some kind of ceremony was about to be held. Most of my power is scattered and sealed in the whole glittering jewel cage. Once the cage is broken, the power will return to my body and rebuild my divine body, Bing Wuqing said to Han Fei and the others who had pledged allegiance to her. In a while, I will cast a spell to summon the 5 Yardmasters at the same time and destroy them at the same time. In this way, the glittering jewel wonderland will collapse. However, in the process of casting the spell, I won't have the time to care about the 5 Yardmasters. So, I'll leave it to you to stop the Yardmasters and prevent them from escaping. Han Fei and the others hesitated for a moment, then nodded. When she finished speaking, Bing Wuqing immediately cast the spell and muttered some kind of extremely ancient language. Su Yu was confident that he was proficient in all kinds of languages, but he couldn't understand a single word from her mouth. It was as if it was the language of a brand new race apart from the myriad races. As the incantation sounded, the flower yard master, who was in the 9 jade spiritual pearl, was taken out of thin air and floated above Su Yu's head. The flower yard master woke up from her training in the supreme growing soil. At first, she was at a loss, but her expression changed immediately. Glittering jewel, demonic god, swoosh. Without hesitation, the flower yard master tried to escape, but was pinned down by a blood-red palm. Kneel down obediently. The demon-devouring emperor licked his scarlet tongue and subdued the flower yard master. Then, the yard masters on Han Fei, Bai Ling Tian, and Gu Taishu were taken out one after another and floated above their heads. Of the 5 yard masters, Farhad appeared. There was only 1 yard master left. Once the 5 yard masters appeared at the same time and destroyed them all at the same time, the glittering jewel wonderland, no, the glittering jewel cage would collapse. As for Bing Wuqing, she would retrieve her demonic god's power and recast her divine body. By then, the Jojo continent would face an apocalyptic catastrophe. There's still the last Yardmaster, Bing Wuching, who was calm and composed, said with a hint of excitement. The incantation drifted out, but the martial yardmaster didn't appear above Dongfang Tianfeng's head. Bing Wuching's eyes creased. She pondered for a moment, then glanced at the still open demonic gate and smiled indifferently. So it's here. With a point of her finger, the demonic gate of the cage finally collapsed and turned into a large mass of demonic energy. Then, the demonic energy condensed and shrank into a large pitch-black dog with its eyes tightly shut. It was the martial yardmaster, the black dog. However, Bing Wuching's indifferent smile suddenly stiffened and then dissipated. It was followed by suspicion, which finally turned into shock. You're not the martial yardmaster. You are. How could it be you? A shrill scream came from Bing Wuching's mouth. Her delicate body trembled, and her pupils shrank to the size of needles. Her delicate fists were clenched tightly. Their expressions and actions were filled with panic, anger, fear, and resentment. What answered her was a very lazy voice. It's been many years, old friend. It seems like you still recognize me. The black dog opened its eyes, its face solemn. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. Staring at the black dog, an unbelievable thought popped into his mind. Chapter 1042. It really is you. Bing Wuching took a deep breath, trying hard to calm her emotions and calm herself down. Her clear eyes were filled with shock and speculation. The black dog chuckled and stood up on its hind legs. It crossed its legs in front of its chest and said proudly, "Am I not the holy Qilin that you've been thinking about for thousands of years?" Holy Qilin? Pairs of eyes looked up and down at the black dog, all of them extremely shocked. What are you looking at? I am a sacred Qilin of the 9 regions. What's so strange about that? The black dog looked down at them with a pair of black nostrils. Han Fei and the others were speechless. Which of your hairs can see the appearance of a Qilin? Oomph. The black dog's body flashed with black light, as if it couldn't stand the questioning gaze, and its body suddenly expanded to a height of 30 feet. At the same time, his body underwent a huge transformation. The head kept changing shape until it turned into a strange head with 2 horns on its head and a fierce and mighty face. Fist-sized scales flickered on the surface of his body like a suit of black scale armor. In the blink of an eye, the inconspicuous black dog had transformed into a Qilin that was extremely similar to the legends. The black dog was really a Qilin, and a sacred Qilin at that. They were already in a state of confusion. The black dog that was fighting with them in a battle of wits and courage was actually a god, and it was the god of Jiuzhou. In this way, many questions were answered. Why did it have the magical power to transform the glittering jewel wonderland and turn this place from a training ground into a demonic realm so easily? It was because the glittering jewel wonderland was created by it. At this moment, they could not help but feel lost. As the god of Jiuzhou, why didn't he help the challengers? Instead, he deliberately transformed it, causing the Jiuzhou continent to weaken until today. Could it be that the Jiuzhou gods were the same kind of people as the glittering jewel demon god, viewing the common people as ants to be slaughtered at will? Thinking of this, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Hey, why are you looking at me like that? Why aren't you prostrating yourselves in worship upon seeing me? What's the meaning of this? The black dog, no, the sacred Qilin, glared at them with its orange eyes and said in dissatisfaction, "Black dog, shouldn't you first explain what you've done all these years?" Suyu asked calmly. "I'm not a dog. I'm a sacred Kirin," Suyu interrupted him. "It's hard for us to believe a black dog that threatened to kill us just a moment ago, and now calls itself the god of Jiuzhou. I'm not a dog. I'm a saint, although I have guessed some of your actions. They may not have guessed it. If you don't want us all to join the enemy, you better make it clear, black dog." "I'm not. Our patience is limited, black dog. Make it short." Suyu frowned. "What are you trying to say? You're talking nonsense." Staring at Suyu, the sacred Kylan's fist-sized eyes were ablaze. Grinding its teeth, it said, "Nothing, I said I'm the black dog." Suyu looked at it as if it was an idiot. "Aren't you the black dog?" The sacred Qilin ground its teeth again and again. It had the urge to bite this detestable brat to death. With a serious expression, the sacred Qilin sighed and said, "Killing you is saving you." What? If it weren't for the fact that the sacred Kirin hadn't said those words, they would have thought that they were hallucinating. Just as they were puzzled, Bing Wuqing said placidly, "It's right indeed. Killing you is actually saving you." As for the reason, the two deities didn't reveal it, as if there was a great secret that no one knew about. The Jojo continent is a world that I created single-handedly. Billions of lives are the descendants derived from my godly spirit. Killing you is equivalent to destroying my own godly spirit, which is no different from suicide. How could I have done such a thing without special circumstances? However, it's not convenient for me to tell you the reason for now. When the time is right, someone will tell you. The sacred Qilin's tone was very solemn and serious. Han Fei and the others were skeptical. Killing them was equivalent to saving them. Without a clear explanation, it was too difficult for them to believe such a preposterous statement. That's all I have to say. Believe me, it's up to you to help the wicked. The sacred Qilin exposed its weakness in its words. It didn't seem to have absolute confidence that it could deal with Bing Wuqing. Su Yu's eyes turned, and he fell into deep thought. Han Fei and the others couldn't help but think too. The situation had changed, and they still had a chance to turn back. Bing Wuqing didn't care about what they were thinking. She stared at the sacred Qilin and said coldly, "I didn't expect you to still be alive and leave behind a godly spirit in the dungeon. If I'd known this, I would have destroyed your body and soul and destroyed your godly spirit before you were sealed." The sacred Qilin snorted coldly. "If you had the ability to kill me back then, you wouldn't have been sealed here by me. That was your plot. You spent thousands of years preparing this cage. I was careless and ended up being sealed by you before you died." Bing Wuqing was full of resentment. The sacred Qilin said disdainfully, "What a joke. You came to my territory to absorb the power of faith. If I didn't make thorough preparations, would I have waited until you became a deity and used the power of the demon race to kill me? So that was it. Fine, I'll settle this score with your cavern world. Now that you've shown up, what are you going to do? What do you do to me?" Bing Wuqing released the mortal fairy's strength from all over her body, her murderous aura shocking the heavens. "You're just a remnant of a godly spirit, and your strength isn't even at the level of all creations. If I kill you and the other 4 Yardmasters together, I can still destroy the seal and release my strength of gods and demons." What? It was only at the level of all creations? Gu Taishu and the others, who had wavered a moment ago, began to calculate again. The outcome of the battle between the two sides was self-evident. "I have him." The sacred Qilin placed a claw on Su Yu's shoulder unceremoniously. Su Yu's face darkened. "How can you trick people like this?" "Him?" Bing Wuqing's lips curled into a cold smile. "Just him alone. No matter how excellent Su Yu was, he couldn't surpass anyone below the mortal fairy level. Hee, of course it's not enough. You still have me, don't you?" The sacred Qilin laughed strangely, its eyes rolling as if it harbored malicious intentions. Bing Wuqing frowned, sensing that something was amiss. "What do you want?" TSK. As a royal of the demon race, how can you ask such a dirty question? Of course I won't kill you. I'm going to kill them. The sacred Qilin pointed at Gu Taishu and the others. When it finished speaking, Su Yu suddenly felt his body lighten, and the mortal fairy's strength that was suppressing him dissipated. Bing Wuqing's body stiffened, unable to move, and her mortal fairy's aura gradually dissipated. She looked coldly at the 4 floating Yardmasters, a little surprised and shocked. You can directly command the 4 great seals." Obviously, this scene was beyond Bing Wuqing's imagination. "Wait, did you refine yourself into an artifact spirit?" Bing Wuqing seemed to have thought of something and was shocked. "You're so cruel. How could you do this to yourself?" Forcibly dividing the godly spirit into an independent entity was like a martial artist dividing himself into 2. The agony involved was indescribable. Even the demons, who were known for their tough bodies, wouldn't dare to try such an inhumane method. How could I not be prepared to seal a demon god? The black dog chuckled. Bing Wuching recovered from her shock and said to Gu Taishu and the others, "It can only seal me for an hour. If you don't want to die, capture the sacred Qilin obediently." Gu Taishu and the others frowned deeply. It could only seal for an hour? When the time was up, they would still not be able to escape death. Lad, the heavy responsibility of the continent is now in your hands. The sacred Qilin patted Su Yu's shoulder and grinned. Su Yu looked at it and said lightly, "I have someone important to me in Jiuzhou. Needless to say, I won't let the glittering jewel demonic god get what she wants. However, how long can you hold on?" "A very long time." "Then why are your claws trembling?" "Oh, it's epilepsy." The sacred Qilin looked relaxed, but in fact, it was extremely strenuous for him to control the yardmaster and seal Bing Wuching. Perhaps in less than an hour, Bing Wuching would be free. Once he escaped, he would kill the 5 yardmasters at the same time. The glittering jewel wonderland would shatter, and Bing Wuching would retrieve the power of the demonic god. The glittering jewel demonic god would reappear in the world. There is no need to elaborate on the consequences. "It seems like I don't need to persuade you anymore." Su Yu sighed. With their intelligence, why would they need outsiders to persuade them to make a choice? Han Fei said indifferently, "We have no other choice." Gu Taishu, Bai Ling Tian, and Han Fei were all silently preparing their magical powers to capture the sacred Qilin. "Then come." Su Yu sighed helplessly. He put his palms together, and the brilliant light of the sun burst forth continuously from his palms, gradually enveloping Su Yu's figure. At first glance, it looked like a sun was rising slowly from behind Su Yu. Finally, they were going to fight. One side represented the glittering jewel demonic god, and the other represented the sacred Qilin. "I'm sorry," Han Fei said dispassionately. Her figure flickered abruptly, leaving a residual shadow that tore apart the space where she stood. Gu Taishu and Bai Ling Tian struck at the same time. However, the expected ultimate collision did not happen. Instead, 3 figures flashed near Bing Wuching, and 3 extremely powerful attacks landed on the sealed Bing Wuching at the same time. With a muffled groan, Bing Wuching's body swayed a little. Her face was flushed, and bright red blood flowed from the corners of her mouth. Even mortal fairies would be hurt if they didn't have any active defense. "You have chosen him, after all." Bing Wuching's face was expressionless, as if she had already expected their betrayal. She closed her eyes and sighed softly. Then, she opened her eyes, and a murderous intent surged forth. "But unfortunately, you have chosen the wrong one." Buzz! A blood-red residual shadow flew past, attacking Han Fei and the other 2. Their expressions froze, and they each launched a head-on attack against it. In the end, 3 figures were forced to retreat, and a few dull thuds were heard. Han Fei managed to stop herself, and stared coldly at the blood-red residual shadow that had repelled them. "Demon-devouring Emperor, are you really going to help the evildoer and make the Jiuzhou continent your enemy? As the heroes of Jiuzhou, how could they possibly defect to the enemy, especially with the sacred Qilin as a variable? Judging from their joint attack just now, even the sealed Bing Wuching would be injured. Being injured meant that she was not invincible. Losing the remnant of the Qilin's horn wouldn't completely destroy Bing Wuching's godly spirit, but an hour would be more than enough to severely injure her. The threat of a severely injured Bing Wuching would be greatly mitigated. Therefore, they pretended to be obedient, but in fact, they were attacking Bing Wuching together. It was a pity that there was an unexpected existence. What is the Jiuzhou continent? What did it give me? The glittering jewel demonic god could give me the supreme power of a mortal fairy, but can Jiuzhou do the same? The demon-devouring emperor wore a cold, ruthless smile. Han Fei sneered. "Do you really believe the oath of a demon? The inner demon was created by them, so nothing can restrain their oaths." "Humph! How could the heart oath that master signed with me be an ordinary one? That's only used to make a deal with lowly bastards like you. I am the one whom master truly favors. What I signed was the demonic god's contract. Demonic body contract? Before they could react, the demon-devouring emperor turned into a streak of red and attacked the three of them. The exchange just now was enough to determine who was stronger between them. The demon-devouring emperor alone could suppress the three of them. With him in the way, they wouldn't be able to hurt a single hair on Bing Wuqing's head. Just as they were hesitating about whether to retreat or not, a sudden ray of sunlight shrouded them from behind. The glaring sunlight made them unable to look straight at it. They could only vaguely make out a silver-masked, imposing figure controlling the boundless sun to confront the demon-devouring emperor head-on. Thud, thud. Even someone as strong as the demon-devouring emperor took 2 steps back, a look of surprise on his face. Level 2 of Fairy Level Cultivation Technique. It's hard to imagine that you're only at the level of a 9th grade fairy. Han Fei and the others look surprised as well. Fairy Level Cultivation Technique at level 2 of top class. Such a level of comprehension didn't match his cultivation at all. However, the fact that Suyu could repel the demon-devouring emperor was gratifying to them. Leave him to me. As for Bing Wuqing, I'm counting on you guys. Suyu stared at the demon-devouring emperor and said without turning his head, "Besides, Bai Ling Tian, it's time for your ancient bronze corpses to come in handy. Didn't you bring them to the glittering jewel wonderland for this very moment?" At the edge of the mausoleum, 80 All Creation's bronze corpses were still motionless, waiting for orders. Although their offensive power wasn't as strong as any of Bai Ling Tian and the other 2, their numbers were precious, and their combined power was no weaker than the 3 of them. I understand. At a time of life and death, we really can't hold back. Bai Ling Tian looked at the crowd. Show us whatever trump cards you have. If you're too late, don't even think about using them again in this lifetime. When he finished, he took out a ghastly bell and shook it incessantly, emitting an eerie sound that sounded like the wailing of a ghost. All of a sudden, the sinister energy of the universe thickened by several folds, and chilly winds blew. The 80 pairs of bronze corpses with their eyes shut opened their eyes abruptly. They tore the space apart and leaped towards Bing Wuqing, attacking her forcefully with brute force. Gu Taishu hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath. He took out a pine branch and imbued it with the mortal fairy strength that Suyu was very familiar with. With a glint of menacing light, Gu Taishu stabbed the pine branch in between Bing Wuqing's brows. The massive mortal fairy's strength rushed into Bing Wuqing's body with unstoppable force, destroying everything inside. Han Fei didn't hold back either. With a backhand grab, she took out a pitch-black skeleton from her space ring. It was surging with demonic energy and emitting monstrous demonic might. This was the remains of the previous supreme heavenly demon faction master, a relic of the mortal fairy's supremacy. It contained extraordinary mortal fairy's strength. Under the simultaneous attack of the 3 supreme forces, Bing Wuqing's body shook violently, and she spat out a mouthful of strange golden blood. Deep fury finally appeared on her indifferent face. "All of you must die." Boom, boom. As if in response to her voice, the entire glittering jewel wonderland rumbled incessantly, as if it was about to collapse. Han Fei and the other 2, who were close to her, were sent flying while vomiting blood, as if they had been severely injured. If not for the fact that she was still frozen in place, they would have thought that the demonic god had escaped. Han Fei clenched her blood-stained teeth. "Don't be afraid. Her injuries have worsened. The attack is effective. We still have hope." The 3 of them rose up and continued to besiege her fearlessly. Chapter 1043. You're good at sneak attacks. The demon-devouring emperor rubbed his palms. Why look for excuses when you're inferior to others? The demon-devouring emperor spent a lot of time with demonic beasts. His intuition was even sharper than that of demonic beasts. How could he not have sensed Suyu's attack just now? He had merely underestimated Suyu and suffered a minor setback after taking the blow head-on. Moreover, in terms of sneak attacks, the demon-devouring emperor had severely injured Han Fei and the other 2 when they were besieging Bing Wuqing. That was a real sneak attack. He, in this world, Those who dare say I'm inferior to others are all dead except for Zhan Wushuang. The demon-devouring emperor grinned. His smile was exceptionally sinister. That's because you didn't meet me, Su Yu said placidly. The demon-devouring emperor licked his lips, a savage glint flashing in his eyes. In the immortal, confining forest, the more resistant the prey is, the more interesting it is to eat. Watching yourself being eaten bit by bit while howling in pain, that is the most perfect enjoyment. Congratulations, you've given me a long-lost feeling. The demon-devouring emperor's smile was ferocious. A savage aura surged from his body, making him look like a man-eating beast. A creepy voice came from his mouth. I'm going to eat you. The taste of human flesh is delicious too. Swoosh. As soon as the words drifted into Su Yu's ears, the figure had already descended. A palm covered in blood-red light viciously reached for Su Yu's chest. It was less than 5 feet above him, and Su Yu could even see a pair of bloodthirsty, beast-like eyes in the remnant shadow. Bang! Without hesitation, Su Yu raised his hand and struck with the supreme Sun Divine Palm. Wherever the sunlight passed, the palm technique would arrive. There was no way to avoid it. Beast Soul Blood Armor. The demon-devouring emperor grinned hideously. Dark red blood gushed out from the pores of his body, forming a layer of red armor on the surface of his body. At first glance, it seemed to be an ordinary flesh or a defensive armor. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that there were beast souls trapped in the blood river of the armor, struggling and roaring as they tried to break free from the restraints of the armor. There were tens of thousands of them. The hellish scene made Su Yu's pupils constrict involuntarily. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately retreated. The moment he retreated, the demon-devouring emperor, clad in the blood armor, was unaffected by the supreme Sun Divine Palm. His claws tore at the spot where Su Yu had just been fighting. Space trembled slightly, and a tiny spatial crack suddenly appeared. If he had reacted any slower, his chest would have been ripped apart and his heart dug out. Quick reflexes and decisive actions. You'll be very interesting to eat. The interest in the demon-devouring emperor's eyes intensified. There was nothing he looked forward to more than hunting a dangerous prey. Su Yu swept his gaze over the beast spirit blood armor on his body. This blood armor had gathered the souls of 10,000 beasts, and any attack would first be taken by the souls of the dead. Only after surpassing the limits of the souls of the dead would the attack truly land on the demon-devouring emperor's body. The soul of 10,000 beasts had absorbed all the damage from the attack just now, so it hadn't harmed his body at all. Unless it's an attack that surpasses all creations, it's impossible to penetrate the beast spirit blood armor. Su Yu analyzed the situation quickly. It seems like this is the only way. Su Yu shook his palm, and a pitch-black steel needle appeared in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, the steel needle immediately turned into nothingness. When it reappeared, it had already pierced into the beast's soul armor. The soul-piercing needle was an item that specialized in attacking the soul. The beast's soul armor was filled with the souls of demonic beasts. Wherever the steel needle passed, the beast's souls were immediately pierced and nailed to death, losing the ability to resist. However, the beast's souls at the back immediately replenished, weakening the power of the steel needle. After nailing thousands of beast souls to death, it was finally exhausted. Before it could touch the demon-devouring emperor's body, it had no choice but to withdraw. Throughout the entire process, the demon-devouring emperor maintained a sneer and made no effort to stop it. This armor was forged according to the blueprint of a treasure found in an ancient relic, and I gathered the souls of 10,000 beasts. Its grade is fairy artifact. The demon-devouring emperor brutally stated a certain fact. In this world, apart from a handful of people, no one can break through my beast soul armor. You're obviously not one of those few people. Next, you'll be hunted by despair, because you can't do anything to a hunter. With a cruel grin in his eyes, the demon-devouring emperor's body turned into a line of blood. In the next breath, he appeared in front of Su Yu in a flash, his blood-colored palm reaching for Su Yu's chest, aiming for his vital organs. Suyu's expression was calm. An invisible silk thread floated out of his sleeve and sliced through the air. Without hesitation, the demon-devouring emperor retracted his palm and blocked it with his armored arm. Wherever the silk passed, hundreds of souls vanished into thin air, destroyed with a single blow. However, it still couldn't penetrate the souls of the dead and hurt the demon-devouring emperor. The demon-devouring emperor was slightly taken aback. This is a very special silk, at least sharper than the silk of any silkworm demonic beast I've ever seen. Unfortunately, I've met my nemesis, Titter. The failure of the close-range attack gave the demon-devouring emperor an opportunity. So he was caught off guard and caught in the chest. However, before the demon-devouring emperor could exert his strength, his expression changed abruptly. His beast-like intuition detected a powerful threat at that moment. Years of experience in the jungle enabled him to make the most accurate response. Without hesitation, he immediately gave up the best opportunity to tear Suyu apart and leap backward. But he was still a step too late. The moment he retreated, it was as if the gates of the demonic dimension had been opened beneath Suyu's feet. With him as the center, a massive circular mark of rolling demonic energy formed. Shortly after, a savage and ferocious aura erupted from the circular mark into the sky. The demon-devouring emperor saw a black demonic dragon 1,000 feet long suddenly rush out and slam into his chest. The immense force sent him flying 10,000 feet away, smashing through 7 or 8 ancient tombs in succession before he managed to stop. The beast's soul armor on his chest dimmed. Nearly 30% of the beast's souls had perished in the few moments they collided with the armor. The beast's spirits that could not be replenished in time failed to protect him, causing his body to be injured. Although it was not breached, his body was seriously injured. Grinning and suppressing the pain, the demon-devouring emperor raised his head. His face gradually took on an almost maniacal excitement as he laughed heartily. Good, good, very good. No one has been able to hurt me for a long time. You are an interesting prey indeed. If I don't eat you, I'm afraid I won't die in peace. Boom! All of a sudden, the demon-devouring emperor opened his mouth, and a huge virtual shadow of a demonic beast appeared behind him. It was 10,000 feet tall, with blood-red eyes. Its lower body resembled a Kylan, but its head was exceptionally ferocious, giving off an ominous feeling. Tai, Suyu murmured subconsciously. The heaven-devouring demonic eye, which had been silent for a long time, emitted a slight heat as if it had sensed something, but it quickly quieted down. Upon closer inspection, the appearance was somewhat similar, but it was far less ferocious than the Tao Tai. In particular, its avaricious charm was much weaker. Not bad. This is my bloodline, the bloodline of an ancient ferocious beast, the Tao Tai. Although it is thin and not pure enough, it is the only remaining Tao Tai bloodline in the world today. The demon-devouring emperor had a cruel look on his face. Next, bear the fate of being devoured. To die by my spiritual body is your blessing. Roar! The virtual shadow of the Tao Tai behind him emitted a strange sound, its mouth opening abruptly and extending infinitely. The demonic dragon, which was attacking again, seemed to be shackled by a certain force. Immediately after, its body suddenly split into two, turning into demonic energy and dissipating. It had been bitten into pieces by something. Just as Suyu was in the midst of his amazement, an obscure force locked onto him. A sense of crisis descended in an instant, sending a chill down Suyu's spine. At that moment, Suyu took out a wooden bird and activated it without any hesitation. The next moment, Suyu tore the space apart and appeared in another space. The entire space where it was originally located was now exposed to the void of 100 miles. The entire space had been devoured. Space teleportation treasure. The demon-devouring emperor exclaimed in surprise. Even all creation's strong men could not craft such a treasure. Only mortal fairies could do so. No matter how many treasures you have, You can't save your life. The demon-devouring emperor bellowed coldly as he stared at Suyu. The virtual shadow of the Tao Tai behind him was about to be activated again. Suyu did not dare to be careless. He activated the wooden bird and dodged quickly. Inside was the armor of Blood Soul, whose defense was almost invincible. Outside was the bloodline of the Tao Tai, which could devour the void. No wonder Bing Wuqing was willing to use him. Such a person could be said to be invincible even in his youth. Who could fight him when he grew up? Suyu dodged repeatedly, and danger surrounded him. Bing Wuqing, who was watching from the side, felt her heart clench. If Suyu had not secretly transmitted a message to her not to act rashly, she would have stepped forward to help. But she also knew that in her current state, she was no match for the demon-devouring emperor. A quarter of an hour later, Suyu could not dodge in time. Half of his sleeve was devoured, and he almost lost his arm. It's time to end this, Suyu. The demon-devouring emperor licked his lips. Using the void teleportation treasure consumed a lot of energy, and Suyu could not keep using it. When he could no longer use it, he would be devoured. Yes, it's time to end this. To the demon-devouring emperor's surprise, Suyu nodded and put away the wooden bird. You're not running anymore? The demon-devouring emperor narrowed his eyes and did not attack again. His intuition told him that the situation had changed. Whiffs of danger were approaching him. Who told you that I'm running? I'm almost ready. Let's begin. Suyu said placidly, pulling out a heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword from his back. Looking at the sword, the demon-devouring emperor felt a chill in his heart. From the edge of the sword, the demon-devouring emperor could tell that the sword's power was indestructible. A heavenly orchid silver bamboo that is more than 1,000 years old. The one who spoke was none other than the sealed Bing Wuqing. Even with her experience, she could not help but be surprised. The heavenly orchid silver bamboo, which had been extinct for 10,000 years, had been obtained by someone who had made it into a semi-finished fairy sword. Be careful, this sword is very dangerous. Bing Wuqing warned him for the first time. The demon-devouring emperor grinned. Don't worry, I won't die if I don't eat him. Roar. As he spoke, the virtual shadow of the Tao Tai opened its mouth once again and swallowed. Suyu's face remained impassive. With a flick of his wrist, the heavenly orchid silver bamboo streaked across the void. There was no brilliant sword energy, only a dazzling silver trail that left a sword mark in the void. The descending devouring power vanished into nothingness under the casual strike of the sword. Disappearing along with it was a large area of the void that had been slashed apart. The devouring failed, and the virtual shadow of the Tao Tai suffered a backlash. With a pained roar, its body collapsed. Chapter 1044. However, the vicious look on his face did not change. With the protection of the Blood Soul armor, he was invincible. The remnant sword chi from the immortal sword swept across the Blood Soul armor. Countless beast souls pounced over and dissipated the sword chi. No matter how powerful the immortal sword was, it was ultimately unable to harm the main body. The demon-devouring emperor secretly heaved a sigh of relief. A cold smile appeared at the corners of his lips again. That's all. The power of that sword doesn't seem to be that great. Really? Suyu spoke calmly, while his eyes emitted a strange ripple. If you didn't have the Blood Soul armor, would you still be able to utter such words? The demon-devouring emperor had a bad premonition, and an extremely uneasy feeling lingered in his heart. When Suyu said that he didn't have the Blood Soul armor, his heart started beating wildly. What do you mean? The demon-devouring emperor retreated warily towards Bing Wuqing. Literally, Suyu's eyes, which were emitting fluctuations, suddenly shot out an illusory ray of light. At the same time, he waved the fairy sword in the air, drawing a silver trajectory. The demon-devouring emperor forced himself to remain calm as the sword approached. With the Blood Soul armor, no one could do anything to him. However, the demon-devouring emperor's heart turned cold when the terrifying sword chi swept towards him. The beast soul in the Blood Soul armor did not resist the sword chi. It allowed the sword chi to pass through the armor and reach his body. No matter how he tried, The souls of the 10,000 beasts seemed to be controlled by something, unable to move, until the icy cold sensation penetrated the demon-devouring emperor's physical body and penetrated his soul. You're proficient in the art of soul illusion. In the instant that his soul was shattered, the demon-devouring emperor voiced out the terror in his heart. He had never expected that Su Yu would have mastered one of the most profound soul techniques, the soul illusion technique. Using illusions to confuse the souls of the beasts, he didn't attack them, causing them to lose their sense of defense. The armor of Blood Soul was practically non-existent, allowing the demon-devouring emperor's body to withstand the full blow. Just now, it seemed like Su Yu was dodging the Tao Tai's virtual shadow's engulfment, but in fact he was constantly casting illusory techniques to ensure that he could confuse all the demonic beast souls. This was the final strike of Su Yu's plan. The demon-devouring emperor had a keen intuition. The only way to kill him was to catch him off guard. The Blood Soul armor that he was so proud of was what made him so careless. The previous few attacks were meant to divert attention. Only the Heaven Sun gazing at air technique's bewitchment technique, combined with the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword, was the true killing move that he had prepared. This strike had shattered both his physical body and his soul. With reluctance, the demon-devouring emperor's body slumped to the ground. He had lost his life. The few people who were besieging Bing Wuqing had complicated expressions on their faces. There was joy, but there was also heaviness. Su Yu's strength was beyond their expectations. Even the demon-devouring emperor died at his hands, and they were most likely inferior to the demon-devouring emperor. However, Su Yu's expression was far less relaxed than theirs. His eyes were still fixed on the demon-devouring emperor's corpse, and his eyes were filled with amazement. The demon-devouring emperor, whose physical body had been shattered and his soul destroyed, emitted a black glow from his body. His tightly shut eyes opened once again, and they were filled with a dense demonic aura. Just as he had said, he died with his eyes wide open. The demon-devouring emperor slammed his palms on the ground and stood up. He looked at his body in surprise and couldn't help but laugh wildly. Ha! So this is the contract of God. As long as the god is not destroyed, the servant will not die. Contract of God. Su Yu furrowed his brows as he looked at Bing Wuqing's tranquil expression. Resurrect the dead? His resurrection wasn't scary, as Su Yu would kill him no matter how many times he resurrected. The tricky thing was whether the contract of God had other uses. Su Yuxian, do you have any last words? The demon-devouring emperor laughed wildly at the sky after being resurrected, his face full of malice and malice. Swoosh! A black light flashed, and before Su Yu could react, a pitch-black figure appeared in front of him, as if it had teleported. There was a pair of pitch-black horns on his head, fangs protruding from his mouth, a pair of pitch-black wings on his back, and a long tail, as sharp as a thorn. A horrifying image that had never been seen before suddenly appeared in front of Su Yu. The demonic divine servant. The injured Dongfang Tianfeng stared at the scene, her face grave. The demonic divine servant was the unique form of the legendary servants of the supreme demonic god. As long as the demonic god was not destroyed, the divine servant would never die. Moreover, it could use the godly energy of the demonic god. Su Yu's reaction was equally swift. Strange waves shot out of his eyes to confuse the beast soul, and he swung his sword horizontally. Poof! The sound of the physical body and soul shattering reverberated in the physical and spiritual planes at the same time. The demon-devouring emperor's body and soul were destroyed with a single blow. However, in the next moment, a pitch-black demonic claw suddenly grasped the blade of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo sword. The demon-devouring emperor's closed eyes snapped open with a hideous grin. I'm alive again. At the same time, the demonic palm slammed down, and a terrifying force bombarded Su Yu's chest with the force of an avalanche. Su Yu's face changed slightly. He swung his sword horizontally, dispelling most of the force, but some of it still rushed into his body. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Ha ha! Too weak. The demon-devouring emperor looked up to the sky and laughed, charging forward again without fear of death. Su Yu raised his sword to kill him, but in less than a breath's time, he was immediately resurrected and injured Su Yu. So weak. Can't you be a little stronger? It will be more interesting to kill you like that. The demon-devouring emperor was extremely excited. He had never been in a state of invincibility, and he was in the peak of pleasure. The situation had taken a turn for the worse, and everyone was extremely worried. They did not think that Su Yu was incompetent. If it were them, they would be helpless against the demon-devouring emperor who could resurrect infinitely. He could not be killed, and he could not be destroyed, but he could only die once. If it were them in such an unfair battle, they would have died a long time ago. It was only thanks to Su Yu's brilliant magical powers and powerful treasures that he could hold on until now. However, they could see that in the long run, Su Yu would inevitably die. Su Yuxian, run away. You can't win against the demon-devouring emperor like this. With the existence of the god's contract, it can use the godly spirit and has an immortal body. It doesn't matter how many times you kill it. Dongfang Tianfeng could not bear to watch any longer and sighed. After all, the power of the gods was not something that mortals like them could fight against. Even a divine servant was not a match for them. Was fighting against the glittering, jewel demonic god really a joke? The corners of Dongfang Tianfeng's mouth were filled with deep bitterness. Can the god's contract be broken? Su Yu asked as he stared at the demon-devouring emperor, who had resurrected once again. Dongfang Tianfeng was taken aback and smiled bitterly. Unless it's the deity himself, it would be difficult for an outsider, even another deity, to break the god's contract. To her astonishment, Su Yu nodded. All right, let Bing Wuqing break the god's contract. If Su Yu hadn't said it, Dongfang Tianfeng would have turned a deaf ear to it. Bing Wuqing was counting on the demon-devouring emperor to hold the seal for an hour. How could she possibly cancel the divine contract and give up on the demon-devouring emperor at such a critical moment? Was this a lame joke? So cold. Su Yu killed the demon-devouring emperor with a single stroke of his sword once again. But this time, he did not wait for him to revive. With a flip of his palm, the palm-sized underworld pearl appeared, and he hurled it at the demon-devouring emperor. Along the way, the underworld pearl expanded to 100 feet in size and pressed the demon-devouring emperor down from the sky. When the demon-devouring emperor revived and opened his eyes, he was shocked to discover that apart from his head, the rest of his body had been suppressed to the point where he could not move at all. However, there was not much panic on his face. So what if you suppress me? You can't kill me. The demon-devouring emperor sneered. He spat out a sword of demonic chi from his mouth and slashed at his own head. He was actually planning to commit suicide. After death, he would use his head to reform his body and soul. However, before he could make a move, a silver sword light pierced the space between his eyebrows. The ice-cold sword intent sank into his soul, shattering it. His physical body was also shattered by the sword intent. However, his entire body was still intact. Su Yu had also deliberately adjusted the gravity of the underworld pearl so that his body would not be crushed into minced meat. The next moment, the demon-devouring emperor was revived. He opened his eyes and said coldly, "What's the point of doing this?" Su Yu did not answer. He killed him with a single stroke of his sword. The demon-devouring emperor was annoyed. It's meaningless. What answered him was still a single stroke of his sword. After 4 or 5 consecutive times, the demon-devouring emperor finally sensed that something was wrong and felt a little uneasy. This cannot go on. He tried to commit suicide again to escape the predicament of being suppressed by rebirth. However, as soon as he was resurrected, he was immediately killed by Su Yu. He had no time to perform any tricks. After dying a dozen times, the demon-devouring emperor began to panic. He bellowed, "What the hell are you trying to do?" "I'm trying to get Bing Wuqing to cancel your god's contract, of course," Su Yu said calmly and killed him with a single stroke of his sword. After being resurrected, the demon-devouring emperor yelled, "My master needs me. I can't cancel the contract." "Huh? What if your master can't sustain your death?" Resurrection does not happen out of thin air. The price is to use your master's godly spirit, isn't it? Suyu said calmly. He raised his sword and killed him. Suyu had tried to resurrect someone from the dead. The price was a head of white hair. The demon-devouring emperor opened his eyes. There was a hint of panic on his face. He said angrily, "So what? My master is a demonic god. She only needs a weak, godly spirit to resurrect me. If she was at her peak, killing you countless times wouldn't hurt her godly spirit. But now, her godly spirit is so weak that it's not much stronger than that dog Kylan. How much godly spirit do you think she'll bear for you?" Suyu smiled. He saw the panic in the demon-devouring emperor's eyes. Then, he raised his sword. The sacred Kylan's body trembled. It was covered in steaming black air currents. Grinding its teeth, it said, "Brat, I heard a very bad adjective." The dog Kylan was a new species. Suyu smiled and killed the demon-devouring emperor one after another, as if there was no one else around. His face was no longer fearless, but full of fear and dread. "Don't." Before he could finish, he was killed with a single stroke of the sword. After more than 100 times, a sigh finally came from a certain corner. "Hey, why do you have to be my enemy?" Bing Wuqing raised her eyes, full of remorse. "If I'd known this would happen, I would have ended your life in the Red Blood Palace and taken only the abilities I need from you." Suyu's hindrance to her was beyond imagination. Swish! A drop of golden blood swirled out of the demon-devouring emperor's brow and returned to Bing Wuqing's body. The demon-devouring emperor's face turned pale instantly. Like a man who had fallen into an abyss, he screamed in terror, "Master, don't. I can still serve you." Poof! Before he could finish, the demon-devouring emperor's body convulsed. His eyes lost their luster, and he could no longer speak. Sigh. "Although I have the power of a demonic god, I can't make use of others," Bing Wuqing said placidly, casually ending the life of a man who had pledged his loyalty to her. Suyu retrieved the underworld pearl. His eyes turned cold, and he said coldly, "It's your turn, Lord Demonic God. There's still a cup of tea left. How long do you think you can last?" Under the all-out attack of Han Fei and the other two, Bing Wuqing was bathed in blood, and her wounds were shocking. "It's more than enough to deal with all of you," Bing Wuqing said placidly, even though her face was beyond recognition. Suyu nodded in agreement. "Of course, Lord Demonic God doesn't have any injuries at all." "Huh?" Han Fei and the other two stopped in unison. Their bodies stiffened as they stared at Suyu, hoping he would repeat what he had just said. Bing Wuqing's aura was weak, and she was covered in wounds. She was much weaker than before. How could she not have any injuries at all? Bing Wuqing looked at Suyu without saying a word. "Lord Demonic God, is it really okay to deceive the diligent and serious juniors like this?" Suyu grabbed at the air, and the glittering jewel fairy scepter in Bing Wuqing's hand flew into his palm. With his 5 fingers clenched, another crack appeared on the 3-cracked, glittering jewel fairy scepter. It wasn't crushed by Suyu, but it had been used before. All of them, including the dog Kylan, have overlooked the existence of this fairy scepter, as well as the true owner of this fairy scepter and the function of this fairy scepter: purification. Suyu stroked the fairy scepter with his palm. Within the fairy scepter, golden blood threads as thin as strands of hair were purified. The dog Kylan, the sacred Kylan's pupils constricted. "Impossible! I've already refined the fairy scepter. How could there still be her refinement mark? Have you forgotten who's holding this fairy scepter?" Suyu looked at Bing Wuqing, and for the first time, he felt some tenderness towards her. She had been controlled by a demon all her life, and her life was in her hands. She had even used her unknowingly to refine the glittering jewel fairy scepter. Bing Wuqing's eyes were filled with surprise when the refinement mark was erased. The surface of her body shook, as if some virtual image had been shattered. Then, Han Fei and the others gasped in astonishment. Bing Wuqing was unscathed. Chapter 1045. Sigh. Bing Wuqing sighed softly. "Why are you always the one who spoils my plans?" Her sigh was filled with genuine annoyance. As a god, the creatures of Jojo were like ants to him. Had he ever felt the slightest bit emotional? Suyu was the only one. Suyu put away the glittering jewel fairy scepter and said indifferently, "So, Lord Demonic God, are you ready? I hope you can hold on for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." Han Fei, Gu Taishu, and Bai Ling Tian attacked one after another. Even Dongfang Tianfeng joined in the attack after a short rest. With the treasures bestowed upon her by her tribe, she could exert great power. All of a sudden, the whole sky was filled with the fluctuations of the mortal fairy's strength. Multicolored rays of light descended along with the power to destroy the ground. Without the purifying effect of the glittering jewel fairy scepter, Bing Wuqing had to bear all the attacks. However, when the smoke and dust dispersed, all of them were shocked. Bing Wuqing had only suffered some superficial wounds, and they had exerted their full strength. Bing Wuqing's previous situation was a deliberate act for them. Her physical defense was far beyond their expectations. The scene stunned Han Fei and the others on the spot, making them hesitate. This was the best they could do. Even an hour would be far from enough, let alone a cup of tea. A sense of helplessness surged in their hearts. Were they really pushing themselves too hard? Continuing the attack would be futile. Why not take the chance to surrender or flee? Many struggles arose in their hearts. Right at that moment, a voice that inexplicably calmed them was heard. "Why don't you let me try?" Even Gu Taishu couldn't deny that Su Yuxian's voice made him look forward to it. Bing Wuqing, who looked calm, couldn't help but stare at Suyu. She could ignore Han Fei and the others, but Suyu was the only one she paid special attention to. Did Suyu have some special tricks up his sleeves? However, Bing Wuqing wasn't particularly worried. "Su Yuxian, I admit that you are resourceful, and your tricks and treasures are unexpected, but you haven't grown to kill me yet. Even you know that my tricks and treasures are unexpected. How do you know that I don't have something even more surprising?" So you took a light breath. Some things should indeed be revealed. Their current situation was much more dangerous than they had imagined. If they couldn't kill Bing Wuqing within the time it took to brew a cup of tea, what awaited them was certain death. "Could it be that you're trying to tell me that you possess a relic of God that can destroy my godly spirit?" Bing Wuqing laughed lightly, as if she was cracking a joke. There was only one deity in the 9 states, the god of the 9 states, the sacred Cauldron. As for its relic, the Dongfang family, as an ancient family, had searched for 10,000 years, but they had only found a broken piece of its horn in the extreme west of the forbidden area. That was the only thing in the world that could kill her. There could not be a second one. However, when Suyu solemnly took out an item from the 9 jade spiritual pearl, Bing Wuqing's indifferent smile disappeared quickly and was replaced by a solemn and grave expression. Even the sacred Cauldron, who was struggling to hold on, was shocked and took a few deep glances at Suyu. Suyu was holding a jade box that had more than 10 layers of seals in his hand. He looked extremely cautious. In the jade box, there was a leaf with a special color. It was a golden leaf that seemed to be made of gold. The leaf was the size of a palm, and its veins were very distinct. Wisps of golden liquid could be vaguely seen flowing in the veins. Because of the isolation of the jade box, Han Fei and the others didn't notice anything extraordinary about the leaf. They could only guess the terror of the golden leaf from the expressions of Bing Wuqing and the sacred Cauldron. After a long silence, Bing Wuqing took a deep breath and stared at Suyu solemnly. She said in a low voice, "Su Yuxian, are you really going to do this to me? I don't think I've ever hurt you or anyone around you, not even those who descended from the foreign continents." Suyu was shocked when he heard that. She had actually investigated the whereabouts of the Zhenlong continent's living beings. If she could the Central Prefecture's king do the same? A sense of nervousness filled his heart. It was time to head to the Central Prefecture and search for the place where the Zhenlong continent's living beings were stationed. Elder Liao had been gone for years, and there had been no news of him. Something must have gone wrong. However, Suyu's face was as calm as ever, even when Han Fei and the others were looking at him strangely. "You didn't do it because you're not capable enough. If you take back the power of the demonic god, will you still behave yourself?" Suyu was unmoved. "I don't want to waste a golden leaf for you. As long as you give up on taking back the power of the demonic god, I can stop. However, that was obviously impossible. As a demonic god, I'm restrained by the human ants of Jojo. It's no different from an elephant being imprisoned by a group of ants. I don't want to live such a life. Therefore, I must take back the power of the demonic god. Bing Wuqing said resolutely. Although your golden leaf is a relic of a deity, I'm afraid that deity can't even protect himself now. Can he? Otherwise, he wouldn't have such a small amount of godly spirit. Bing Wuqing said dispassionately. Suyu nodded slowly. That's right. The golden leaf has absolute lethality against all creation's strong men, but it's not enough against mortal fairies. However, it's enough to kill you. The divine energy in it is a sharp weapon that can destroy your godly spirit. The ice blades of the mortal world were naturally incomparable to the treasures of the martial artists. However, even the blades of the mortal world could destroy a heart. The divine energy contained in the golden leaf was relatively weak, but it could restrain the godly spirit. Therefore, even a tiny bit of it could kill the defenseless Bing Wuqing. When he finished speaking, Suyu tossed out the golden leaf without another word. The golden leaf fluttered and emitted a golden radiance as it landed on Bing Wuqing's shoulder. In an instant, the golden leaf burst forth with boundless golden radiance, engulfing the entire glittering jewel wonderland. Within the golden radiance, all the living creatures sensed a natural, peaceful, and beautiful atmosphere. It was as if their souls were purified. All the living creatures experienced a change in their minds, except for Bing Wuqing, who experienced a change in her body. The golden leaf attached itself to her body. Wisps of golden threads were extracted from her body and absorbed by the golden leaf. Trees absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen. The behavior of the leaf was a special ability of absorption. However, it wasn't carbon dioxide that was absorbed, but the godly spirit of a deity. In a short moment, the godly spirit absorbed was more than 10 times what was given to the demon-devouring emperor. Bing Wuqing's hair lost its luster at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was gray at first, then snow white as snowflakes. A pair of clear and beautiful eyes were gradually covered with a faint black color, and a purple luster appeared on her rosy lips. In the blink of an eye, her beautiful and elegant face became extremely evil. That was a part of the demonic god's true form. Without the godly spirit, she couldn't continue to disguise herself as a human, and gradually revealed her true demonic appearance. The sacred Kylan, who was struggling to hold on, couldn't help but burst into laughter. This is hilarious. You didn't die in the hands of a deity like me, nor did you die in the erosion of 10,000 years. Instead, you're going to die in the hands of an unknown junior and have your godly spirit stripped away while you're still alive. Linlang, oh Linlang, don't you think it's pathetic? Her snow-white hair fluttered and covered her forehead, but it couldn't cover her eyes, which were glowing with a black glow. At some point, her voice had also changed. It had lost its gentleness and freshness like a spring breeze, and had gained a tinge of vicissitudes and hoarseness. You forced my hand. Bing Wuqing's eyes seemed to look through time and space. She sighed with vicissitudes, as if she had made up her mind. The sacred Kylan frowned slightly. Why? Do you still have a chance to turn things around? Bing Wuqing didn't speak, but looked deeply at Bing Wuqing in the distance. Helplessness filled her eyes. I didn't expect that I would still end up like this. Suyu realized that something was amiss, and he bellowed, Wuqing, leave the cemetery now. However, it was too late. Bing Wuqing took a deep breath and uttered 4 words that shook the world. Homologous, primordial root, all things return to one combine. As she bellowed, Bing Wuqing's body changed uncontrollably. White hair, black eyes, purple lips, she was exactly the same as Bing Wuqing. The slight difference was that Bing Wuqing seemed to be struggling. Do you want to go back on your word? If you break your promise, my mother will destroy your body and soul. I don't have a choice. Instead of waiting for death, I might as well take back the other half of my godly spirit, Bing Wuqing said indifferently. She had mistakenly entered Jian Wuxing's belly and fused with the fetus Bing Wuxing. So half of her godly spirit had been taken by Jian Wuxing. Therefore, even the aura of their souls was exactly the same. However, Bing Wuxing was the dominant one, and she could control Bing Wuxing at any time. At this moment, Bing Wuxing transformed into the half-demon form, and 9 virtual shadows appeared behind her. It was the heavenly sword spiritual body. The difference was that the 9 virtual shadows materialized one after another. When the 4th one materialized, Su Yu's expression changed. Bing Wuxing could only materialize 3 of them, and she couldn't materialize the 4th or more. We were born from the same source. If she is the sword, I am the scabbard. All these years, if I hadn't suppressed her, she would have opened the 5th sword. Now that this scabbard of mine has left, she can finally reveal her true brilliance. Swish, swish, swish. It stopped when the 5th sword materialized. This was because Bing Wuxing didn't have enough control over Bing Wuxing. However, as he stared at the 4th and 5th sword, Su Yu felt even more threatened, especially the 5th sword, which wasn't something that all creations could resist. Even mortal fairies might not be able to resist it. Oh no, she has been controlled by the demonic god, and her spiritual body has been activated. If we don't stop it, we'll all die. Gu Taishu bellowed and immediately attacked Bing Wuxing, his murderous intent intense. The pine branch in his palm drew a mysterious trajectory in the air. An attack imbued with the mortal fairy's strength bombarded Bing Wuxing with destructive power. Su Yu was suppressing Bing Wuxing with all his might, and couldn't stop it at all. Just as Bing Wuxing was about to be crushed by the mortal fairy's strength, suddenly, the 4th and 5th sword behind her broke through the clouds. The mysterious trajectory of the pine branch was forcefully interrupted, and a deep wound appeared on Gu Taishu's chest, accompanied by a faint smell of burning. A long sword that was entirely fiery red flew back to Bing Wuxing's back leisurely. A single sword shattered the mortal fairy's pine branch's attack, and even wounded Gu Taishu. Although the pine branch had been used for a long time, and the mortal fairy's strength was weak, the power of the sword was unparalleled. However, this was only the 4th sword. The 5th sword slashed at the sacred Cauldron. Chapter 1046. Starting from the head, it disintegrated into demonic energy, and the whole body began to decompose. This time, it wasn't just a normal decomposition, but a decline. You're really ruthless, aren't you? You forcefully fused with Bing Wuxing's origin, and you even fused a part of her with it. With that, your demon god body will no longer be pure, and the demon god power sealed in this place will not acknowledge you. The amount of demon god power you can retrieve will not exceed 50%. At that time, you'll only be in existence between a god and a demigod, and you'll never be able to regain your position as a god in this lifetime. The sacred Cauldron side. The determination of the glittering jewel demonic god was unexpected. It had thought that the geniuses of Jojo could seriously injure her. However, Su Yu had sacrificed the golden leaf and pushed her into a desperate situation, and things had come to this. As a deity, the sacred Cauldron understood all too well what it meant for a former deity to abandon her position as a god. She probably wouldn't let Su Yu off for the rest of her life. The sacred Cauldron collapsed, and the 4-yard masters lost their control, returning to the challengers. The seal was lifted silently. Bing Wuxing lifted a finger. At this moment, the whole world seemed to be quiet, and only their heartbeats could be heard. She had broken the seal. The terrifying existence who could kill all of them with a single thought had regained her freedom. All around the glittering jewel wonderland, there was a deathly silence, and the atmosphere was oppressive and oppressive. They were going to die. An extremely uneasy thought emerged in the minds of all the living creatures. Bing Wuxing lifted her finger and pointed at Bing Wuxing, who had a body of the same origin. Wherever her fingertip passed, Bing Wuxing struggled violently. No, I'd rather die than become one with the demon race. Bing Wuxing resisted with all her might. Her hatred for the demon race wasn't as deep as the people of ancient times, But her hatred for Bing Wuqing was sincere and intense. You and I are one. Why struggle? You are me, and I am you. Bing Wuqing hooked her finger, and Bing Wuxin was teleported in front of her. Bing Wuxin's resistance seemed weak and powerless. No, we are not one. It's you. You're the one who made my mother despise me, and you're the one who forced me to stay in the Red Blood Palace. Bing Wuxin's resentment stemmed from her mother, Jian Wuxing's attitude. She was the leader of the human race, but she gave birth to a daughter who was controlled by the demon race. Bing Wuxing said indifferently, "You hate me because I prevented Jian Wuxing from acknowledging you as her biological daughter? All these years, he never touched you. He never even looked at you? If that's the case, you really should hate me." However, Bing Wuxing shook her head. Tears streamed down her cold and beautiful face. She looked miserable and sorrowful. No, she has never acknowledged me as her daughter. I don't resent her because I know that she is the king of Jojo and one of the 9 great commanders of the human race. I never hated her for it, and I never hated you for it. Then you. Bing Wuxing was slightly confused. I hate you because every time after I fell asleep, she would touch my forehead and cry quietly. Every time, she would spend an endless amount of mortal fairy's strength into my dantian. That's why my cultivation has not improved in the past 100 years. Hearing this, everyone fell silent. How could a mother not love her daughter? In front of others, she was cold as ice and treated them like strangers, but behind others, she was a kind mother. She shed tears for you? Bing Wuxing was stunned. I remember that she never shed tears. What Bing Wuxing hated was not that she had been wronged, but that her mother had been tortured psychologically. Wait, you said that she has been infusing mortal fairies' strength into your body all year round? Suddenly, Bing Wuxing seemed to realize something. Her expression changed, and she pointed a finger at Bing Wuxing's forehead, as if she was probing for something. After a while, her pretty face changed abruptly. Her snow-white hair suddenly danced wildly, as if she had been deceived. She flew into a rage. Damn woman, so you've long expected this day, and left something in my daughter's body. Hee, have you finally realized? The sacred Kylan, who had fallen on the ground, laughed triumphantly. When I was in the Marshall Tower, I detected the mortal fairy's strength in this little girl. At first, I thought that some senior had left it in her body for cultivation. But when I saw you, I understood that the mortal fairy's strength was left for you. If I'm not wrong, that mortal fairy's strength is an ancient sealing technique passed down from hundreds of thousands of years ago, the Dying God sealing technique. It requires at least 10 years of the caster's life and mortal fairy's strength to continuously set up the technique. It's specially designed to restrain incomplete deities like you and me. It can seal us in an individual and become nourishment for her growth. As long as we don't die prematurely, it's only a matter of time before this little girl becomes a deity. Unfortunately, this technique requires the deity's own consent. But unfortunately, if you hadn't merged with Bing Wuxing, the sealing technique wouldn't have been activated. But now, you've willingly merged with her, so the sealing technique has been activated naturally. Ha 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 ha, I'm dying of laughter. The glittering jewel demon god is going to become nourishment for an ordinary girl to become a deity. The glittering jewel demon god probably never dreamed that Jian Wuxing would leave such a trick in her daughter's body. Now, the origin had been merged, and the sealing technique had been activated. Bing Wuxing seemed to have fallen into a shocking scam. She lost her composure as a demon god and fell into a frenzy. Jian Wuxing, I want you to die a horrible death. She finally understood why Jian Wuxing had signed a promise with her, forbidding her from merging with her daughter. That was clearly to numb her, to make her think that Jian Wuxing was simply doting on her daughter and didn't think further. Now that the Dying God sealing technique had been activated, she would be sealed in Bing Wuxing's body and become nourishment for her to thrive. The feeling of being deceived finally made Bing Wuxing explode with rage. Ha, 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 I think you'll die first. That person could set up such an ancient sealing technique. So her cultivation and capability must be above yours, not below yours. You should just obediently become nourishment and disappear from this world. The sacred Kylan laughed heartily. Its mortal enemy had finally met its end. What else could be more delightful than this? Umph! A muffled snort that sounded like a sudden clap of thunder made the sacred Kylan shudder all over. Its abdomen exploded from the inside out. Su Yu and the others suddenly felt a terrifying force pressing down on them, making their insides turn upside down. The dying god sealing technique has indeed restrained me, but don't forget that this technique has a certain requirement for the receiver. She must be above the level of a mortal fairy. She's merely a 9th grade fairy now. She's not qualified to contain me yet. However, the sacred Kylan was still laughing. Don't forget that even if she didn't seal you for the time being, you've already begun to become her nourishment. In less than 10 years, she'll become a mortal fairy, and there won't be any obstacles. By then, your consciousness will also be sealed, and you'll become a complete nourishment. Bing Wuqing didn't speak because everything was personal. Bing Wuqing glanced at Bing Wuxin coldly, her eyes filled with murderous intent. Why? Do you want to kill her? You're of the same origin. If she's injured, the injury will appear on your body exactly as it was. If she dies, even if you have a godly spirit, you'll die immediately. You're the same person now. The sacred Kylan couldn't stop laughing. Bing Wuqing was silent for a long time and gradually withdrew her gaze. Indeed, if she killed Bing Wuxin, she would die. The injuries she suffered would also be transferred to her body. She couldn't do anything to Bing Wuxin at all. All she could do was watch as Bing Wuxin absorbed her essence, until she became a mortal fairy 10 years later and sealed her completely. Slowly closing her eyes, she forcefully suppressed her anger. When she opened her eyes again, she raised her fingers and grabbed Bing Wuxin, who was unable to resist at all. A surprising scene appeared. When their bodies touched, Bing Wuxin seemed to have fallen into water, and she completely merged with Bing Wuxing. In the end, only Bing Wuxing was left on the field, and Bing Wuxin was nowhere to be seen. A struggle appeared on Bing Wuxing's face, as if Bing Wuxin's soul was resisting and trying to regain control of her body. After a long time, Bing Wuxing's expression gradually calmed down. When she opened her eyes, there was a pair of pitch-black pupils. It was Bing Wuxing who had taken control. 10 years, in less than 10 years, you'll no longer be able to suppress that little girl's soul. Her consciousness will awaken, and you'll be imprisoned in the seal, falling into an eternal slumber until you die. The Black Kylan kept laughing coldly. I really admire the human's guts and schemes. She dared to plot against a demon god like you. Bing Wuxing's body remained motionless, and her voice was hoarse. Before you laugh at me, shouldn't you take a look at your own situation? 10 years is enough for me to find the secret technique to break the dying god sealing technique, and enough for me to destroy Jojo and vent my anger. As for you, the glittering jewel wonderland, and the geniuses you cherish, none of them will live past today. The sacred Kylan's smile froze abruptly, and it fell silent for a long time. Indeed, I'm powerless to stop you from doing this. I'm afraid the creatures of the Jojo continent will find it difficult to stop you as well. You've retrieved half of the power of the gods and demons, and the creatures of Jojo are no match for you. However, you'll be destroyed in 10 years, and you'll become nourishment for the new deity of the human race. My death and the destruction of the glittering jewel wonderland won't be a pity. The only pity is... The sacred Kylan looked at Su Yu and the others, its eyes filled with deep pity and regret. They are excellent seedlings, but they won't be able to escape this calamity. Bing Wuxing sneered. Coupled with her devilish face, she looked exceptionally sinister. It's good that you know. Then do it. I'm tired of guarding you for 10,000 years as an artifact spirit, the sacred Kylan said with a sigh. However, Bing Wuxing's gaze shifted and fell on another person. Her sinister gaze was like frost, piercing one's soul. However, among the people I want to kill the most, you're only the second. There's someone who deserves to die before you. As soon as the word die fell, A bitter smile appeared at the corners of Su Yu's mouth. Things had developed to such a stage, and it had long surpassed the extent of human expectations. He had tried his best. However, it was impossible for him to sit and wait for death. Su Yu had weathered through all kinds of crises along the way, and he had always held on to his last breath in an undying belief. At this moment, in such a desperate situation, he was no exception. I don't hate dying at the hands of the JoJo deities, because this is a battle between deities, and the winner takes all. However, I did die at your hands. Putting aside the fact that you obstructed me from retrieving the power of the demonic gods, you forced me into a trap in the end, and I became nourishment for others to become deities. This is deeper and more painful than the hatred that sealed me 10,000 years ago. Bing Wuqing walked towards Su Yu. Her face was calm, but her body was trembling. How I wish you could follow me. How I wish you could become my right-hand man. How I wish we could still be fellow apprentice. But you, why do you obstruct me? Bing Wuqing sighed bleakly, and with another step, she was already in front of Su Yu. Su Yu couldn't help but retreat, only to find that his feet couldn't move at all. No, he had lost control of his entire body. A formless energy sealed Su Yu's movements, rendering him unable to move at all. At this moment, Bing Wuqing was already in front of him, and she stared at Su Yu with a complicated look. I thought we would be friends. Goodbye, junior brother Su.